You're listening to Find the Good News, episode 44, The Saving Throw, featuring Bruce Plauché. Find the Good News is produced by Parker Brand Creative Services, a branding agency that thinks sideways, pushes forward, and gets your brand up. See what else we do at parkerbrandup.com. It's Unwind Wednesday again, and that means I've got more good news for you to chew on this week's episode featuring Southwest Louisiana counselor Bruce Plauché. Bruce has a positive energy that really kept me engaged the whole time we talked, and he's got some really great ideas about counseling that I've never heard before. There's definitely something to be gained from our conversation. Next week's episode will be the last episode of June, episode 45, and it features the talented duo of Justin and Emily Martindale. If you've been a listener for a while, then you know that I've got a chance to visit with couples that are in business before, and it's a really great treat. I'd never met Justin or Emily before, and I think we got along really great. Our conversation was alive, so I definitely can't wait to pass it along to you. July's lineup of episodes is going to be really fun. First, we'll be kicking things off with episode 46 featuring Cameron Parish Port Director Claire Hebert-Marceau. Episode 46 will be another special road trip edition. Claire invited me out to Rutherford Beach to visit with her right next to the waves of the Gulf. There's a lot of salt water in this episode, and I'm not just talking about the Gulf. Claire really shares all the room in her heart with me, and I really feel honored to share it with you. Other episodes in July are going to feature Braylon Jenkins, Mike Brignac, and Kayla Rigney. We'll also be celebrating the 50th episode of Find the Good News in July, and I'm hoping to have something really special for you to listen to. I know what you really came here for, and it wasn't announcements. It's time to sync up your audio, put in your earbuds, open up the door to your heart, screw on your thinking cap, and press play on a little good news. When you produce a show about good people doing good works, when you open that door, you never know who's going to sit across the table from you or how they're going to end up there. Someone contacts me and says, "This guy really helped my family and me. You should get him on Find the Good News." It's hard to resist making the first contact. I've learned to trust my listeners because they've been right every single time. And that track record didn't change when local counselor Bruce Plauché sat down behind the microphone. There was an instant easiness with Bruce, and our conversation flowed naturally from the jump. Bruce used our natural affinity for comic books and science fiction as the building blocks of our discussion, not all dissimilar from the way he uses them to help the people he works with to build better lives for themselves. He's a natural talker and listener, and I found that he engaged everything I asked with enthusiasm. At Bruce's center, I experienced an authentic nature and honesty, qualities that were flourished by petals of his quick wit and humor. If you tune into this show because people share openly, then you've picked a good one because Bruce illustrates just how healing it can be to open up in a healthy way. He's teaching children and adults how to develop more robust communication and relationship practices through role-playing, and he sees results. What I learned from Bruce is that it's essential to understand the origins of others, and it's of equal importance to know where you come from as well. Sometimes you have to roll the dice and mix things up to discover your saving grace, your superpower. The good news is that in trying on a lot of masks and cloaks, you sometimes find the one that fits you just right, and you may discover your true face in the process.
Wake up, it's morning. You're dreaming up a story. I can hear the way it's going, 'cause you're laughing in your sleep on the path to your deliverance, and a holy wall of light pouring through your window.
Old news, bad news, fake news. Sometimes you just want to shut it all down and get no news at all. With Find the Good News, I aim to change that by focusing on good people doing good work. I visit with artists, educators, civic and spiritual leaders, musicians, business owners, students, volunteers, and everyday citizens who are using their creativity, resources, and talents to bring hope and happiness to their corner of the world. In each episode, I dig into the hearts and minds of my extraordinary guests. We have street-level conversations about relatable things going on in their lives. Discover the critical life experiences that shape them, the perspectives that drive them, and the fundamental beliefs that are anchoring them to a path of goodness. There's a lot of news in the world. My name is Oran Parker, and I'm going to find the good.
And I love you just as well.
I keep the show pretty conversational. I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to any of them before.
I haven't yet. No, I need to. I need to get more free time, so I need to get.
I think we all could use that. I find my mental health the quality of that goes up when I have more free time.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, time to think about it. So like I said, when you walked in the door, I know like this much, and I'm holding up about a half inch about you. You were actually recommended for this show by a relative of mine.
Yes. Yeah. Whenever you first sent me the thing, I was kind of thinking, well, I wonder what I'm being nominated for. I actually have quintuplet children. And so that was my first thought, was it was probably has something to do with the quintuplets. We also have a sixth child. But then I was also like, but we're also doing those D&D groups that have kind of gotten really big. So it really could be any of those things.
Yeah. Well, I went, anytime somebody recommends somebody, because I get waves of it, I'll get like 4 or 5 names, and then it'll kind of die out. And then I think what happens is, I don't know, maybe I'm putting something out there whenever I'm making posts, but then I'll get another wave, And so your name's actually been in the mix for a little while, kind of floating around. And I said, well, I'm going to try to connect with him, but I like to do a little bit of research, I don't want to just bring somebody in cold and go, okay, I have no idea what's going on. But you're right. I was kind of doing my little light cyber stalking. I said, hey, he's got a van full of kids.
Yes.
I saw a picture you posted the other day, where you were heading to live at the lakefront.
Yes, yeah. Let's see, was it live at the? Yeah, live at the.
It was a while back. Yeah, it might have been like a couple months ago.
I get it confused with that Sundown.
Downtown and Sundown.
It's like I don't. They all seem really cool, but I can't remember which one's which. Yeah, we did go to live at the lakefront. Really awesome event. I have a lot of artist friends, and so they had a lot of booths and stuff. But that was the thing we got to do the least of, because taking 6 young children around, you don't want to be around a lot of artsy, expensive things.
Yeah, grabby things. Oh, I know. I think that my son, and he loves science and loves going to the museum, but he's tactile, man. Like, he wants to engage with it. Looking is not like, we went to the Houston Museum of Natural Science about a month ago, and some of those exhibits, I'm like, oh, I can tell. Like, he is on an invisible tether, man. He wants to get up there with the bones, like, oh, hey, I want to touch that.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
And the quintuplets are pretty disciplined. I think they're used to it. They're just used to being kind of marched around like a marching band. I actually am divorced from their mom, and so we split them about 60-40, and so they that's kind of how they are. And then I have with my wife, we have a daughter, and she's a little bit more free. She's got that free spirit, so she's the one that we were having to rein in. So it's like marching around with this group that kind of stays in line, and then you have this other one that's kind of all over the place.
Something that's really been it's interesting how these conversations shape up, because I find talking about my kids, especially with somebody else who's talking about theirs, I always have questions. And for me, something that I've noticed, especially in the last 5 years, is that my children's interests are a lot more mature and adult, I guess, and are things that I would have thought maybe that I wasn't interested in until I was older, is where I'm going with that. And they want to know more than just like the skin of a thing. They're like, no, okay, you told me that, but I want to know like how this works on all these different dimensions. Do you kind of experience that?
I do, and this is dangerous because you're saying this to me now, and I'm formulating this theory within 10 seconds of you talking, and so I'll say something, and then after a couple of minutes, I'll probably be like, wait, that's not right. But I imagine it has a lot to do with technology. I mean, when we were growing up, it was, I think my kids are, the Quints are 6, and then my daughter is about to turn 4, and I think we played Mario, but that was about it. And when you played Mario, you really only played Mario for like 30 minutes, and then you'd put it down because you're like, that's about
that was it. It's over, game over. Yeah.
And you'd go out and you'd play, and you'd be with your cohorts, is what we call them. It's people of your age group, and so you get to learn from the people in your age group. And then nowadays it's just watching YouTube and watching, they even have like the videos where it's kids playing with toys. With that Ryan kid has his own show and stuff. And and so that they watch older kids and they're trying to emulate and role model off of those older people.
Yeah, their role models are totally different. Yeah, that's right. I didn't think of it that way, but they're seeing kids their own age do these things and they're going, well, what's the difference in them and me, really quickly, and going, I should be able to do that. I can do that.
I mean, as a 6-year-old, I think in passing I would pass by my older brother and his friends who were like 5 years older than us, and then they would hurt us in some way and we'd run away from them, and that was about the only contact I would have with older kids, whereas nowadays it's just constantly looking at what the older kids are doing on YouTube and stuff.
Yeah, no, that's I totally get that. Especially with my youngest and honestly my next oldest, I have one that's gone from home. She's 21 soon, but my other two are, well, he'll be 16 soon, and then one's about to be 9. But the 16 and the 9-year-old, that's where I've seen it the most. Like their interests were just way beyond almost my means to even keep them interested. I mean, I just didn't have that capacity sometimes. I was like, man, they want to know more and go further with this than I ever would have probably thought about.
Right? Yeah. And there's some really expensive hobbies out there nowadays.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, like yesterday, I'll give you an example. My son really wants to be involved in scientific experiments. And, yesterday I'm thinking, what's something low key that we can do? And the most low key thing we could think was like dropping Mentos into the soda bottle, and I mean, I'm going, it's got to be low key because I don't have much time and you can't go dumping tons of money in this. And so my wife agreed. She goes, okay, look, I'm going to go buy a couple of bottles of soda, some Mentos, and that's going to be kind of the science for today, right? Like we don't have a lot of time.
Makes me really want to go out and buy some Mentos right now.
It's pretty exciting. Well, he built it up in his head, and so he had seen a YouTube video, where they did this really complicated thing. And so we get home, and within 30 seconds, he's tried to do this complex thing. It didn't go great, didn't do what he thought it was going to do. And I said, well, before we go to the next bottle, because I mean, we only bought 2 bottles of soda to waste, So we did the second one and we got a reaction, but man, I could tell like it bugged him all night. He was just like, I messed that first experiment up. I should have slowed down. I needed this and that. And I was like, I honestly believe we probably could have bought 20 bottles of soda. And went through them all yesterday.
That's a very good point. I have one of my kids, Reese, is very he's like my Leonardo, my Cyclops of the group, and he does every little mistake he has, he just fixates on, and it's really hard to get him to move on to something. And I guess I'm just gonna blame YouTube today. That's where I'm going to keep going back to. When you get those YouTube videos, they probably take hundreds of those Coke bottles, and you're right, they're probably trying to take all these.
And you're only seeing
that huge reaction that you're getting, and they might even do something else to even alter it. And so they might add something else to the mix that we don't even realize, just so they can get a bigger reaction from it. That's what our kids are getting bombarded with, and so then whenever they face it in real life, it's the same thing with video games. That's the thing that really frustrates my son is Mario. Whenever he can't do something in Mario Odyssey, exactly like he's seeing on YouTube, and it's like,
we didn't have that comparison. I think we were watching, knowing my son's involved in like science and astrology and astronomy. I don't know which one's the one that's not about the star signs. He's into the planets and things like that, just really reactive things. He's always telling me about the volcanoes on the moons around Jupiter and all this stuff. I go, how do you know all this stuff? But anyway, I thought, what he'd like, and I don't know if you've ever seen the movie. It was one of Jake Gyllenhaal's first movie, The October Sky, where he builds the rockets.
I vaguely remember that one, yes.
I thought he might like that, That's in that kind of category, and I think I created a monster because that movie put this... Let me say it like this. Let me get my thoughts collected. So when I'm watching that film, I'm rooting for the kid, right? It's a true story, so I'm rooting for the kid. His dad's going, don't get your head stuck in the clouds, come work in the coal mine. I'm going, come on, kid, keep going, because we know the end of the story. We know the kid is the guy that's at NASA, you know, who's helped create the whole, you know, rocket program, getting the space shuttles, right? So we're rooting for this kid, and all the naysayers were going, yeah, y'all shut up, you know, he's going to do it. On the same note, being a parent and watching that with your child, I'm going, oh, it's fueling this interest. But then the reality is my kid now is going, hey, what can I like tear apart in this house and build whatever I've got in my head, right?
Yes.
You see what I'm saying? So now this movie has set the precedent that if, you know, I'm rooting for the kid, well, shouldn't I be rooting for my kid to go repurpose, you know, the vacuum cleaner and create a, you know, a whatever?
Yeah.
Right. So it's
definitely.
It's an interesting thing, because then you're going, then I get to step in the dad role and going, well, I don't want you to come work in the coal mine, but I don't want you to take the vacuum apart either.
And I'm happy, I know it.
If you're like me, then you've got a long wish list of things you need to do around your house, things you just can't get to. It's not that I don't want to do them, but between my responsibilities at work, producing this show, and squeezing in some valuable mental downtime, I can't seem to get around to fixing the small stuff, and the big stuff is just waiting in line. To be honest, it kind of stresses me out. Maybe you're stressing out too. Well, stress no more, because I've got good news. My friend Ben Von Duke has started a handyman service, and he takes the mystery out of getting these things done. Ben Von Duke is not just some guy that calls himself handy. He knows what he's doing, and he knows a whole lot. Not only is he an experienced and professional carpenter, but he's kind of a Duke of all trades. What I love is that he's created an a la carte price list of services, so you don't have to worry about getting in your pockets too deep before you're ready. He'll fix your running toilet, install appliances, replace fixtures, install ceiling fans, repair sheetrock and concrete, and a whole lot more than that. Look, I'm not too proud to say this, but sometimes it takes me 3 times as long to fix something, because I've got to get online and search videos just to figure out what tools I need. Then I have to go buy the tools that I don't have, and then kind of sort of come home and do the job. I don't have to do that anymore, because Ben Von Duke will do it, and do it better. On top of all that, he's just a good person, someone you can trust. He's honest, he's kind, and those are things that I value highly, and I bet you do too. You can get a hold of Ben Von Duke, the Duke of all trades, the good old-fashioned way, by using the phone. Call or text Ben at 337-540-1355. That's 337-540-1355. He'll send you his service and price list, and trust me, his prices are more than fair. And do me a favor, when you do message Ben at 337-540-1355, tell him you heard about the Duke of all trades on Find the Good News.
And I remember growing up, it was I always played in bands, and you know, I had all these musician friends, and you'd have the guys who were like, oh, I think about dropping out of high school because you know, my band's gonna get signed. It's like, oh, dude, like,
right.
And there's a fine line between maintaining that kid's dream, but then also making sure they're pursuing something tangible, something realistic. But then again, if you don't have those parents who are letting their kids' dreams, then you don't have the ones who
exactly. Yeah. So it's like, how much of a, you know, I guess it's kind of like, one visualization I could have on that is like, you want to create a ramp for your kid, but you also want there to be enough of an incline to it so that it's not just a free-for-all, right?
Yes.
To where it's like they get the full experience of, hey, you know, there are some rules and boundaries of navigating. You can be a rebel, but you can also be a rebel within the framework of reality, you know?
And that's kind of that's really how counseling kids is. It's, I think, as a parent, we always have the tendency, you know, the track that we go on is never going to be that straight line that your kid needs. It's always going to go a little bit off course. Maybe you're being a little bit too hard. Maybe you're a little bit too lenient, or, you know, you might be pushing their dreams a little bit too much, or kind of feeding into their unrealistic dreams, or you're not letting them do it enough. And as a counselor, that's kind of what I look to do is see how I can help that kid go to the other side, help the parents kind of get them to that other side that they're not nurturing.
Yeah, so that's great. I'm actually glad you segued into that, because I was hearing our conversation and I was going, this actually walks right into what you do. Right. Yep. I mean, we're talking about kids and the way what they're dealing with in the modern world. I mean, so tell the audience what you do. I mean,
a lot of stuff. So I don't have a specific population that I work with. I do work with a lot of kids. I got typecast there with having 6 kids of my own. So I do work with adults, also family and things like that. But
right.
A good bit of what I do is working with kids. I'll work with kids that have ADHD issues, or sometimes parents who assume they have ADHD issues. And then I work with a lot of individuals with autism or I have a private practice at New Horizons Counseling Center, but then I also do case management through the Institute for Neuropsychiatry.
Okay.
And so throughout the day, it's like every hour I'm working with a different issue, totally different population. And I like that. It keeps me very...
Was that by choice? I mean, did you choose to work specifically with children, ADHD and autism and things like that? Or did that just come about and you felt like, hey, I'm kind of being pulled towards this?
I think starting, when you start out as a counselor, it's a lot harder than you realize it is. It's kind of like if you're a barber and you want to keep a steady clientele and you want to work 40 hours a week, you need at least 160, 200 clients. It's the same thing with counseling. If I see somebody an average of once a month, in order to keep a 40-hour a week clientele, you have to have 160, 200 active clients to make that happen. And so at first you're just scrounging around trying to find any job you can find.
Sure.
And at some point when counselors start to build their base up, they start to find what they really like doing and try to focus on that. I think what happened was at the office that I work at, there's not a lot of people that wanted to work with kids, and so I kind of got a lot of the kid clients.
I see.
And I really enjoy it, but then also I still work with pretty much every population, because I think I'm one of those people that like a jack of all trades that's not really a master of anything. Mm-hmm. And I like to keep busy in a bunch of new stuff, and so I like to kind of go from population to population, because it keeps me keeps it fresh, it keeps it new.
I can see that. And then also just the density of that. I mean, so if you were to just deal with children, I'm sure there's times, just like any other profession, where when you're talking to an adult or you learn new things with each person, I'm sure that you deal with in a counseling situation. So something you encounter with an adult, surely at some point you go, hey, that's relevant to something I'm dealing with a child.
Most definitely. And you almost never work with just, if you work with a client long enough, you're almost not just working with that client. You're going to eventually start working with the family, or even friends. And even if they don't come into the session, you're doing it vicariously because they're talking about their friends and family. And so with any client that I've been working with for at least 3 to 6 months, I'm already starting to kind of teach the kid maybe adult things so they understand the adults a little bit better, or if I'm working with the adults, I'm teaching them kid stuff to understand the kids better. I think our social network, not real life social network, has a lot more to do with our mental well-being than we realize. We want to pretend like we're these independent lone wolves, and if we're having an issue, that's kind of us and we have to fix it, or if we're doing great, that's us and we did it on our own. But we're really collectivistic creatures, and so I think that's one of the problems that we get into sometimes, is we don't focus on our social situation enough. We hang out with friends that we shouldn't be hanging out with, or we don't go out and make new friends as our old friends start to move away, and we see our circle kind of start to shrink and decline. And so a lot of times when I'm working with my clients, I am trying to make them build their base up.
Yeah. You're talking my language. All of that. I mean, there's so much to unpack right there. I've been having this conversation with people on this show to some degree or another, that we are creatures of communication. I mean, that's what we are really geared towards. I mean, we're not like any other creature in that regard. I mean, we have so many ways to interact. I mean, we can all of our senses, but then all the desire to interact too. So I mean, how important it is to us, to our relationship. I mean, we have to have healthy relationships if we want to be healthy. That's just the way. I think, like you said, I mean, you can think you're an island and that, you know, there's no ships coming to the shore and that you're just kind of there by yourself, but that's just not the case at all. We're all like countries where things are migrating through and walking through us. You know, and we have a history just like a land has a history, you know?
Most definitely. I work with a lot of guys who are getting out of the prison system. I used to do groups with that, and I still do one group at there's this really cool house called the Bethesda House in Lake Charles. And
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, they only have about 4 or 5 beds, but it's guys who are down on their luck. Maybe they're getting out of the prison system or they're homeless, and they can go stay at this house. And Pastor Jimmy Stevens puts it on, and they basically help them get connected with jobs or other things that they need in the community. And as I'm working with this population, I kind of started to notice, this kind of anecdotal, but I started to notice that if I had a guy that I was working with him and he's about to get out, and we'd be working on the social stuff, and he'd be like, no, I'm not gonna go hang out with my old friends. It's like, okay, cool. And so he'd leave, and then every now and then I'll see him like 6 months later and they're back in the system. I'm like, what happened? And I've had multiple people tell me that they made it a couple of months. They didn't, they weren't hanging out with anybody. They were just, they were trying to stay away from their friends, but then a couple of months would go by and they just get lonely. And someone would hit them up at the wrong time, one of their friends they shouldn't be hanging out with, and it's like, I'm lonely, I gotta go hang out with this person. And that's whenever they would get back in trouble. And because I think especially guys, it might be sexist to say, 'cause probably women too, but guys, we think that our friends don't matter. We think that, that lone wolf, we can do it on our own, man is an island, and we kind of push that friend stuff to the side, and then we get lonely and we don't even notice it until that point of breaking, and it's like we don't have these people around us. And with those guys, I found they'd hang out with the people they shouldn't whenever they were feeling that lonely desperation,
because they know that it's the need for connection. I mean, I guess it's like it's so hard to go build new relationships, right? I mean, or at least it seems it's going to be hard, because when you get into relationships, eventually you're going to get to your story, and maybe your story's not so good, or maybe you've never felt safe telling your story to somebody. And for me, that's how I've always connected with people, is through story. I think maybe that's how everybody is. I don't know. It's like, hey, here's a little bit about me. You tell me a little bit about you. And if we're telling each other the truth, at some point you're going to get intimate. At some point you're going to cross over the fence and get into the things that maybe are ugly or even, painful or whatever. And that's not always, I don't know, maybe we don't always feel safe to do that. So it's so easy to go right back to that group of people, because you go, hey, they know my story. I don't have to retell it, and they don't care.
That's it. And people don't realize that's how we bond. That's when somebody tells us something vulnerable, that's really how we bond with others. So like a lot of times, and getting back to stereotypical sexist stuff, but a lot of times whenever women tell guys, the stereotype is they say, you never open up to me, right? And the guy will sit there and be like, man, I told you what I did. It's from 6 a.m. all the way till the time I went in bed. I told you every single thing that I did that day. And the woman's still like, but you don't open up to me. It's like, I don't know what you're wanting. And what they're wanting is that vulnerability. A lot of times when we share our story, we share it from this place of strength. Everything is the good stuff that we did that day, and the fun stuff that happened to us, things we accomplished. But people really bond with us when we show them our vulnerabilities. It's just like a dog when they show their belly to other dogs.
Yeah.
And that's when that bonding happens. And so you have that guy who pushes himself through work. Even if he's feeling sick, he's at work, he's pushing himself through. He actually bonds a little bit more with his wife if he's able to lay there on the couch and let her make chicken noodle soup for him. Because that's whenever she feels empowered. That's when she feels like he needs her. And a lot of times with with friends. No, there's the other end of the spectrum too. We have those friends that take way too much advantage of us, and they push too
your
far.
openness, and then they're like, "Oh, you're open," and they get all up in there. Right?
I'm going to complain to you every single day, and I'm going to take everything you have. But, but this is for the that other end of the spectrum where you have to show your friends that vulnerability. Otherwise, they're going to get sick of you. They just feel like they're getting that superficial from you. To really get that deepness, you have to show your vulnerabilities.
Yeah, I actually, man, you're just speaking my language, man. Because I think about this a lot, and I think it's a poverty. We live in a sort of a poverty of intimacy, and I really think social media has almost made it worse too. Mm-hmm. But it's we're hungry. When I sit here at this table with, your guest 40 something on here, and that's what I have sensed here at this table every time is people want to open up. They want to have a conversation that's deeper than just what's going on at work or what their schedule's like or how busy they are or just the cyclical 365 days a year holiday cycle, whatever it is. People are, I think, exhausted with that. Mm-hmm. And I think we're really seeing it, I think, out in the world.
I think it starts in elementary school and middle school because those are the ages, like everything that I just said to you, I would never tell to an elementary school or middle school kid because you can't show your vulnerability at that age. If you go into class and show your vulnerabilities, you're going to have half the kids making fun of you and picking on you for it.
Interesting, yeah.
And so you have to learn, like when you're an adult, you have to learn who you can share those vulnerabilities to and who you can't. And typically it's going to be, you could share it with most people. Some people are still jerks. But when you're in elementary school or middle school, even the ones that are cool to you, in a couple of months, they might be mad at you and then they're using it against you. And so in elementary and middle school, we learn not to show our weaknesses. We learn that we almost have to put the suit of power on, like Iron Man, mm-hmm. and show that superficial side of things. And then whenever we get to high school or college, a lot of people never learn to open up and take those suits off. And that's really about the ages where we can start to kind of trust people and do that again. And so that's one of the things that I try to do with kids is I try to teach them how to put that suit on, but also how to know how to take it off, which is a very hard concept.
So you do advocate to some degree. Sometimes you do have to protect yourself. You kind of would say that, right? Sometimes it's good to have that ability to.
Oh, definitely.
And I'm happy, I know it. I'm helpless.
Look, as much as I enjoy talking on Find the Good News about making a change, I'd be less than honest if I didn't admit that change is hard sometimes. I should get more quiet time. I should exercise more, walk more, sleep more. And the one thing that I know I should do, without a doubt, is eat better, healthier, and fresher. But there's a wide berth between knowing something and actually doing something about it. I love to cook, but just like those other should-dos, I don't always make the time. This is where I have to tell you about Fresh Fuel because it takes procrastination out of my way. Fresh Fuel is a fresh take on getting healthy, wholesome, and satisfying foods in your life as a kickstarter to critical change that lasts. When you sign up for a Fresh Fuel program at thefreshfuel.com, you'll find tiers for your specific level of can't get up and go. I know I found mine. My friend and founder of Fresh Fuel, Megan Abraham, wants to do one thing and one thing only. She wants you and your family to eat healthier, delicious, home-cooked meals. That's it. With Fresh Fuel, Megan has taken all of the I can't do it out of putting better meals in front of the people you care about. And she's quick to remind that one of those people should include you. Go to thefreshfuel.com and choose the program that's right for you. Megan provides you with the recipes, supply lists, links, videos, goals, and very important here, access to the Fresh Fuel Facebook group where you can connect with other Fresh Fuelers, real people just like you and me making the same journey. What I love most about meal prepping with Fresh Fuel is that you don't have to do it alone. Megan is right there with you every step of the way, making the same changes you are. Fresh Fuel isn't a diet. It's a life change for those of us that just have trouble changing. Since I signed up for Fresh Fuel, I'm cooking more, eating better, and honestly, I'm feeling better too. I believe in Fresh Fuel so much that I asked Megan to offer Find the Good News listeners a chance to try it out at a discount. Just go to thefreshfuel.com, select one of Megan's signature programs, Fresh Fuel 28,
the 28 Plus, or the 28 Pro plan, and then enter the code Good News to get 10% off your program. That's 10% off a Fresh Fuel signature program by visiting thefreshfuel.com and entering the code Good News. Fresh Fuel has been good news in my life, and I'm betting that thefreshfuel.com will be good news for you too.
There are certain people that when you do show, they are vulnerabilities. I mean, that's why it is that word. And so if you show those vulnerabilities to the wrong person, they will use it against you. In adulthood, there's a lot less of those people who will use it against you. And usually you're starting to surround yourself with people who won't use it against you. They want to bond with you. But in elementary and middle school, you kind of get thrown together with everybody. And I mean, everybody's a jerk. I feel like I'm a good person, but I can think back to times in elementary and middle school where I betrayed somebody's
Sure, I've done
trust
that too.
and,
yeah.
And so it's a very hard age.
Yeah, it is. It's hard to figure that out. Do you find, is it similar when you're counseling an adult versus a kid, where you'll see the same amount of time it takes to get either one to open up, or is it just different per person?
It's different per person. This kind of sounds kind of arrogant, but I feel like that might be what my strength is, my superpower. The thing that I'm good at is to be able to bond with people and to kind of figure out common threads. And and I think that from that point on, once I kind of have that, I don't even have to be the most knowledgeable person or the best person, but just because I understand them, it's a lot easier to kind of get the therapy going.
Yeah.
And then I talked a lot, and I forgot what the actual question was.
Well, just the difference between adults and children. Because, I mean, I'm sitting here listening. I'm thinking about myself,
yes.
Of course. That's only the person I hope I know best. And I think, probably as a kid, I can see myself almost being, if I went to counseling, which I probably should have when I was younger, I could see in my imagination me being very hard to open up at first and then warming up. But then I could see myself doing the exact same thing later in life as an adult.
Yes.
So I'm going, what's the difference between a kid that needs to feel comfortable more up than an adult that needs to feel comfortable?
Definitely building up rapport. That's a huge one. With kids, it's different because it's almost like they don't really understand what the real problem is. They really don't know, and so you just you're building a rapport with them, and you're trying to work with them, and eventually they start telling you maybe some of the things that they see that's wrong, and you can kind of deduce, oh, this is actually what the problem is that's going on inside them. With adults, they do know, but if you tap into it too quickly, you don't see them again. So that was another hard thing about counseling is whenever somebody come in the office, early on, a lot of times I could tell what the issue was, and if I get them to kind of bring it out in that first session, I never see them again. During that session, they might feel pretty good, but then whenever they go home, they start thinking about, I cannot believe I just told that guy that. Oh. They get really embarrassed. They don't
like some shame or something, it's like embarrassment or like vulnerability just kind of overwhelms them.
A lot of times, I would find that, or at least I think that would happen. It could be they're just like, I don't like that guy, I'm not going to go back and see him. But so I learned, and this is something that older counselors will impart that wisdom upon us too. A lot of times we do work on smaller issues because it allows the person to build that trust up with the counselor. And so if you're looking to go into counseling, that would be my advice is if you're an adult, don't just start with your biggest problem first. Go in and start with some smaller stuff and see if you like how the counselor works with you and build that trust up with them. Counseling is just like any other relationship. There's times where you could have the two great people get together and you're like, oh, they're going to be like a power couple, and then they don't make it, and it's just like with counseling, you could have a great counselor and a great person, they just don't jive in a relationship. And so if you do try counseling, try out different counselors and try out different counselors, see who works best with you, and try out small issues and see how they handle those small issues before you jump into some of the big stuff. I think the problem is that sometimes we wait until we're in this emergency mode to go in and get help, and it's very hard to build that trust up when somebody's in emergency mode because they feel like they're kind of backed into a corner, and they're really ready to strike at anything. Full disclosure, that's actually both the times in my life where I sought counseling were
emergency mode situations. One was a relationship situation, and the other was really depression. I mean, I was facing some hard depression, but I would say the second time was more of an emergency because I knew, I guess I had the wherewithal to know I need help. Thank God, because I know people who don't have that. Yes. And I've seen it go way further. And for me, I felt blessed, honestly, to have had just that moment of clarity where I said, okay, I can't do this alone. I'm not an island. I need help.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's difficult to feel weak like that. I mean, it's what I felt like oh, am I weak? But I had to get over that real quickly and just say, look, I can't do this alone.
Yeah, definitely. It's a lot of times in counseling, one of my professors told me this and always stuck with me is people are coming to you for a reason, that they're missing something in their life. They're either missing that person who pushes them, or they're missing that person who's unconditionally nurturing, or they're missing that person who they could just bounce ideas off of.
Yeah.
And it's your job to kind of figure out what it is they're missing. And the problem is that when you do wait to that moment, a lot of times the counselor is kind of like, you come in and they kind of get your personality, and they might try to figure out, okay, I'm going to be a little bit tough with this guy. That might not be what you need at that time. A lot of it's guesswork. And so if you're in that emergency mode, it's awesome you got that moment of clarity, because I think a lot of people, the counselor might kind of guess wrong, and boom, you've just turned that person.
Yeah, I can see that.
Kind of pushed them when they weren't ready to be pushed. One of the things we ask in therapy is we'll ask if they've been in counseling before, and then we'll ask what worked, what they liked, or what they didn't like, what are some things that turned them off, and that'll give us an idea of what they're looking for, what they're needing.
Yeah. Counseling to me was fascinating. I mean, the first time I went, like I said, it was an emergency mode, but I definitely knew I had some things I needed to work through. And it's funny how going into counseling, you think you're so smart, right? You're like, oh, I'm going to counseling because of this. If I had to write it down on paper, I probably could have too. I could say, oh, I'm coming to counseling because I think this. Not long after you're in counseling, for me anyway, it was like, oh gosh, there's a whole other side to this that I wasn't aware of. And once I became aware of it, honestly changed my whole world view. I learned a lot about myself that I was just going, wow, this has got me really scratching my head now. I need to really start looking at all kinds of things that I wasn't looking at. I had problem one or this one little goal here, but what I discovered was all these dimensions to myself that were just lurking beneath the surface.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think the way that we measure intelligence is going to be really changed in the next few decades, in my opinion, because it's like everybody has a different. We just say somebody's smart or somebody's not smart, but there's different realms that our brains are good at. Me, for example, I think when it comes to social issues and when it comes to kind of the way people tick, I think I do have a pretty great intelligence when it comes to that. But when it comes to like electrical things, mechanical things, it's even though I think I'm a smart person, that stuff is just kind of magical to me.
Yeah.
When I actually think about like vinyl record and how it has those bumps and grooves, and you put it on and all of a sudden this symphony comes out, it's like, well, that's magic. My brain cannot comprehend how any of that works. My brain cannot comprehend how electricity works or radio waves, and so if you were going to measure me from that way, then I'd be an idiot. But when you measure me from the point where like social intelligence and things like that, I think I would come out pretty well. And so I think most people, when they say that smart people are hard to counsel. I would change that and say people who think they're smart are hard to counsel. And it's because they haven't come to that realization that there's realms that they don't have this vast intelligence in. And then there goes back to that vulnerability, being able to allow somebody else to kind of take control and kind of help guide you through those things.
Man, I've got a big question for you. I saw a news article the other day, a month ago or so, and I saw that the Dalai Lama has been working on this whole big series. He's calling it his gift to humanity, and he's basically created this for any education system or society that's dealing with any kind of they're just seeing sort of a fracturing of society. It's basically like something they can start teaching children in school. It's not religious, it's not spiritual or anything like that, but he's basically saying that we are not teaching the young of this world emotional intelligence. And he said, that is what we need more than anything in the world right now. And I wonder what you think about that. Do you think that, we, as a child, you're in kindergarten, you're 5 years old, you stay in high school till you're, 17, 18 years old. Do you think that the school systems could benefit from having a dimension that is emotional intelligence education?
Definitely. It's hard. Everything's got that yin and yang to it. Because there's going to be some people who, school doesn't teach that, but then parents teach it. And there's going to be other ones where schools teach it and the parents don't teach it, and then the kid doesn't get it.
Right.
And then on the other sense, you might go way on the other end of the spectrum where you're teaching most of the emotional stuff and not a lot of the technical stuff. And then some of the parents will teach it at home, but then other parents won't cover it. And so I think it's kind of like that, what we were talking about earlier about how with counseling, it's trying to help people find that balance. I think that's the problem with society, is that we rarely go for that balance. It's always one end of the spectrum or the next. It's either we're trying to be really conservative or we're trying to be really liberal. And I'm probably about to have those people that hate centrists say a lot of mean things about me, but sorry. But that's kind of, I do think that our society has kind of gotten to where, the emotional side isn't really being as pushed. In some things, when it comes to other things, we're probably better off than society's ever been in this country. Whereas when I was growing up, we were learning about people in other countries, and so I think our generation has this value that we see in people's lives in other countries, even ones that we would consider vastly different than ours, that previous generations maybe didn't see them as human as we do. We're also very very compassionate, our generation as a whole, when it comes to LGBT than other generations. And so when it comes to some things, we do have this emotional understanding connections that other generations didn't. But then when it comes to those, I guess it would be kind of like trying to I think what we were thinking of is kind of like that in tuneness with nature, that spirituality. But then again, there's times where we are a little bit better, because you have especially in like the East Coast and West Coast, you have those kids that are really getting into Buddhism or yoga, and spirituality in that sense. So it's a very interesting, it's a very large, broad question.
I guess the reason I think of it so often is a lot of times it's just when I'm doing homework with my kid, I think about the energy we're putting into just Common Core math, for instance. I mean, elementary level Common Core math, I'm going, okay, we're putting a lot of energy into this. When you look at what's stacked up in front of a kid every day, as far as the school system goes, I go, there's all these things, but is there anything that's teaching them how to deal with conflict? Or how to speak to each other. Now, granted, I'm not talking about the little, be kind to your neighbor and all that kind of stuff. I mean, we all hear that stuff, but I'm talking about like an actual, program. I don't know. In my mind, when I saw that news article, I was like, man, this is actually interesting. I was like, I just wondered what would happen in a school system or a society if there was an emotional intelligence dimension that was being taught, just like the way we say you take algebra 1, algebra 2, you take this just for your mind's health.
That's a very good point. And I haven't gotten to the Common Core math yet. My kids are just now passing kindergarten.
It's a little different.
Yeah, so it's about to really hit hardcore next year, I think. But I mean, generally, people, I get the kids after they've had the social issues. A lot of times we're looking at elementary kids. It's like, man, I can't wait till you guys can join band or join choir or something like that and get this social aspect going. But even those social aspects don't really kick in until high school. And by then, a lot of kids are already kind of feeling like they're left out. And so that's why they come into the counseling session. And so, yes, the school could definitely benefit from putting some more something, and it teaches that social aspect, social understanding.
Yeah.
And that's not to blame teachers or schools.
Oh, no,
because
absolutely
I know
not. I mean, they're victims to a large degree.
they're pretty much getting told what they have to
Right.
teach, and exactly. And when you look at what they're being told, that already fits more hours than they can actually put into the day.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, they could definitely benefit from it. And even whenever we deal with bullying, one of the main things that we tell kids when it's bullying is you go tell a teacher, and that's actually one of the worst things you can tell a kid to do, because as soon as that kid gets bullied and they go tell a teacher, now they are the social pariah because they're the snitch. Whereas it's instead of teaching kids how to deal with bullying, or even teaching kids how not to bully,
Right.
is something that it's not something that's ever covered in school unless it's like an extra program.
You're hitting into like the value of the other kind of stuff. If we can teach that, not just at home, but in school too, that would be really wonderful. Because I mean, yeah, bullying. I have one of my children was bullied severely for years and years and years. Luckily, came through the other side, but I won't say unscathed. I mean, not 100%. It's definitely changed the way they interact with people. It's I can see character traits that just come from that. I mean, the way they interact socially. And they've been through, every school had the bullying days, bullying awareness, and all those things. And I went to the school and interacted with the faculty. What can we do? Those types of questions. So it wasn't like I was just a standoff parent, but at the same time, I've had that thought. I thought, if we don't start somewhere along the way, putting information in front of kids about how to value the other on a day-to-day basis, then we're always going to have these anti-bullying programs. We're always going to have anti-sexual harassment. We're going to have to continue to have these sub-programs that are always coming up to slap Band-Aids and catch them on the other end.
Right.
If we don't catch them on the front end somewhere.
Well, let's see. I hesitate saying this because this is a book idea I have, and so can we make the listeners sign a waiver that they're not going to steal my book idea?
Don't steal his book. If you're listening to this, you've already
yeah. Especially you, Danny Elaine. I know that you'd be the person who goes after this idea.
A comic book version of your book.
Oh, it's a D&D thing.
Oh,
so he's going to be the one that,
so you and Dan.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Now we're getting into this.
Yes,
Good. Okay.
Yeah. And so I was talking with a client. I think the thing that would be really hard to do in schools is I was talking with a client, and I haven't really gotten to flesh this idea out yet. So there might be some flaws here. People might come back and make fun of me. But we were working with what strategy a kid could use when they're being bullied. And so like one of the big strategies that was going around, I think it was going around the internet, is you look at the person like they're an idiot and you just say, okay. And I use that a lot with autistic kids. And so like if somebody comes in, they're like, hey, you're stupid. They just look at them like they're dumb and say, okay. Kind of like that. Like, and you just try to show no emotion.
I gotcha.
And that's something that can work. And then I had this one client who she's kind of like me, and she's very quick-witted, very animated, and she has a husband who is kind of has that engineering mind. And so she was trying to teach her kid how to be quick-witted and give those quick comebacks, because that's good too, and her kid he was getting a little bit better at it, but he wasn't able to grasp it. And so I kind of suggested that okay one, and that's when it kind of hit me that every kid is different. And so it's kind of like in D&D, you have some people who are they're just more made to be the tank, right? And then you have the other people who are more designed to be the ranger or the range weapon person. And then you have the fighter and the magician and the healer. And each kid has this different personality. And so I think the problem is that if we start to come up with this curriculum where we're like, hey, this is what a tank would do, and we could try to teach the kid that this is what you do. You just sit there, because the tank would be the one that looks like an idiot and says, "Okay," just kind of takes the hit. And so if we start teaching the person who's a healer to do that, they're still going to go home and have that emotional trauma from what happened to them. And whereas if the rogue would be probably the one who's got that more quick-witted and tries to hit the kid back with something even worse. And so if we're teaching them to be the tank, that's another thing. They're going to go home and they'll be like, man, I should have said this, I should have said this, I should have said this. And so I'm thinking maybe about trying to come up with some sort of curriculum that has maybe you take kids kind of like their subtype and come up with a strategy for each subtype, kind of like defining, trying to figure out what category your kid fits into, and then what would be the best strategy for them to deal with bullying. That way it kind of fits into their personality.
Dude, I'm loving this. I'm telling you, my mind is spinning over here listening to you talk, because what you're describing to me is I don't know how to, let me see if I can think of the way to say this. Like, I've always had this feeling or this belief that when there are ills in the world, something will rise up in some capacity or another to quell it and change things. And if we look back, it's kind of like Joseph Campbell's work. He says, if you look back, you're going to see the hero archetype over and over and over again. What you're describing is interesting, because it reminds me a little bit, and this is, again, people are probably going to hate this, but like tarot. And then also Tibetan Buddhism, they have the bodhisattvas, right? And so if you start reading that, I used to always think, oh, the bodhisattva, he's compassionate. The bodhisattva looks at the ills of the world. As I got older and I started realizing, oh, wait, hang on, the bodhisattva has many faces and many arms and many hands, and there's something different in each hand. There are images of bodhisattvas that have fire in their eyes and 2 swords in their hands. And I was like, well, how is that compassionate? But as I started to understand, I was like, these are archetypes for basically something that we need at a time. And it's what you're describing over there. I'm listening, I'm going, this is so fascinating, because that kids can relate to. And those archetypes are things that they can go, hey, I can embrace this, I can take my part in the togetherness, basically, of the team. And
I think that's because a lot of times I see, I will get kids that are being homeschooled, and that's a little bit of a hot topic. I don't want to be the guy that comes out and says, don't homeschool your kids and things like that.
I'd love to hear what you think about it, though. I mean,
I think that sometimes there's a way. Homeschool done right involves a lot of socialization with other kids.
Okay.
I rarely see it done that way. And so a lot of times you're having a kid who's having trouble with social issues, and then you completely take them out of school, and now it's like, well, how are they even going to possibly learn their social issues?
Yeah, now they can't flex the social muscle. So
it's even worse. Or they'll hang out. They'll then try to hang out with. There's just not a lot in this area, and so they'll then either be hanging out with kids that are way younger than them, that the family knows, or kids that are way older, and so they're really not able to connect even then. Because what we said earlier, a lot of what we learn as kids is through role model. And they're watching the older kids on YouTube, and that's where that role model comes from. And so when you get taken out of school, you don't have that role model anymore. Now, homeschool can be a beautiful thing if you're getting that socialization, and if you're connecting with other parents that have that social, getting that social aspect in, and that way they're getting different situations that they can face. But let's see, where do we go? What was even the question?
Well, you were talking about just the archetypes, the team aspect, and
and I really need to flesh that out a lot. And if somebody did want to steal that from me, if you're the type of person that could put a book together and be a little bit, maybe we could team up. You do most of the work, I'll give you my ideas. You do like a 50
idea
split.
Man. There you go.
But I'm the idea guy that doesn't have a lot of time. And so it's finding. I think it helps a lot too, because a lot of times the parents maybe never really understood how to deal with it themselves, and so you have these parents, especially gamers, right, who never really figured out how to deal with the bullying themselves, and so doing something like that goes like a D&D approach to it will be able to connect with the parents. A lot of times your kid doesn't have your personality. They might have the personality of your brother or your sister or someone else in the family. It could be somebody completely different, and so you're sitting there trying to tell them the strategies that worked for them, but they're a completely different subtype, and just doesn't work. And then I also think that each kid could learn what the different subtypes do, because you might be the rogue, but then one day you wake up and you're just feeling kind of tankish that day, and being able to know how that is and understand it helps a lot. And then a lot of times when we do that education, so if I'm sitting here educating a kid who has a predisposition to be a bully on how to deal with bullying, it kind of educates them a little bit on maybe you shouldn't bully kids. And so just by teaching that also kind of prevents it a little bit.
So are you using that at all in your counseling methods?
I was on vacation last week in Pensacola. and it was sitting on the beach in Pensacola talking with a client that had an emergency situation that this idea came up. So this just happened.
Wow.
This is new. This is fresh. And so I've used it with one person, and I guess I kind of used it in a sense because it was I knew the kids, and I knew what strategy would work for them, and so I'd be using that. And so this is kind of the first time that I started kind of like connecting it to D&D or things like that, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I'm thinking about all these things from my childhood now. Listening to this, I'm thinking about comic books, honestly.
Yeah,
and how I've seen this over and over. I was watching some kind of documentary. I don't remember what it was. It was about Batman, but I can't remember what the title of it was. Anyway, there was something in there. They were talking about comic book characters as archetypes, and you had all these guys coming on there, and girls too, who were saying, you know, I was picked on in school, or I was bullied, or I was just didn't fit in with the crowd, but I could, whatever was going on in my life, I could go in there and read the comic book, you know, and then I could relate to that character, and then I learned right and wrong. I learned a sense of justice and how that you should help people. If you have powers, you should use what are gifts or whatever they are, you should use them for the world. And I love that. I was like, man, I actually remember watching that, and I could just, little tears just coming out the side of my eyes, and my wife was like, are you sad? It's just, it touches a part of me as a child that I remember what these guys are saying.
Yeah,
I recall.
And then the salt in the open wound is that these jerk-offs that were bullying us are now taking their kids to watch the movies that helped us get over the things that they were doing
cool.
to us.
It wasn't cool.
Yes.
Back, yeah, right. No, it wasn't. You're right. I mean, I find that it is kind of funny. Yeah. I've told my kids the same thing. I said, gosh, what a golden age of film this is. I said, now it's like the big box office thing. I said, but you know,
they're essentially coming into our safe zones. You know, we had the safe zone of our comic book. We could escape into our comic book, and now it's like, I don't want to go see the new Avengers movies. There's gonna be a bunch of jerks there that made fun of me in high school.
Yeah, no, I get it. Even the lean of comic books started getting a lot darker in the 90s, and then really the movies, some of the DC movies were getting darker, and it really, I remember. And I hope I'm not segueing too off, you know, a rabbit trail too far. But I remember when Man of Steel was coming out, and it's a Superman. I've always been a big Superman fan.
The ESPN Superman movie is like the highlights. They just kind of
that's right. And I was like, this is. I remember watching the trailer for that, and I kind of got that little goosebumpy feeling. The music was good, and I felt like tears in my eyes. I said, wow, I get to live to see a modern, really well put together Superman movie. And when I went and watched it, I actually cried in that movie because I disliked it so much. Because I was like, it was very dark and destructive, and I didn't get the feeling, and I think I was wanting the Donner Christopher Reeve, like he's the good guy. I wanted no
story to it. It really was like, it's like they made a 6-hour movie and then they took a highlight reel and that was Man of Steel.
Action clips.
Yeah,
it hurt my heart a little bit. I know that seems silly, but I mean, I found such a good space in Superman's character when I was a kid. The idea of a being who, you know, was basically a refugee, and, you know, was raised by just these people who cared for him. He couldn't have anybody, and he didn't turn bad. He didn't use his power to gain money or, you know, fame or wealth. He just helped people, and I just loved that idea. And I found a space for it in my heart, I guess you'd say. And so then to watch that, I went, oh, I guess I know. And I'm adult enough to know it was an interpretation, but I think I wanted to go back in time and be touched again, like in my heart, you know, with that character, and I didn't get it, so it kind of.
I can totally see what you're talking about. I was a little bit more partial to superheroes named Bruce's growing up.
It makes sense.
Yeah, I guess there wasn't a lot of Orans out there.
No, very few. That's right.
It was a Parker though. I mean,
I got the Peter Parker thing a lot when I was a kid.
That's the other thing too, is I never liked the Avengers.
Really,
the Avengers were always like the square, you know, superheroes. I was like the X-Men kid, and so like, and then I was in the Spawn when I got a little older. And so like, the Avengers were like what the older kids were into. That was like their square little thing, and so and the X-Men movies are just so bad.
And I'm happy.
You're driving down the road, everything is going just fine. You're listening to the new episode of Find the Good News in your car, and you're all stoked about trying out this zipper merge thing you've been hearing about, when all of a sudden you hear that sickening tap on your windshield that's just a little too loud. I've got some bad news for you. You've just got yourself a rock chip.
Unfortunately, I've got some worse news. If you don't take care of that rock chip, it's going to turn into a crack. But I do have some good news too. You don't have to have a rock chip or a crack, because I've got a way for you to take care of it ASAP. If you go to asapglassco.com right now, you can stop that chip from winding across your windshield like the Calcasieu River. I used to be terrible about getting a rock chip, saying I'll take care of that later, and then later turns into this irritating crack that just spreads from one side of my windshield to the other. I should have taken care of it ASAP by scheduling a repair with ASAP Glass. ASAP Glass is local, right here in Sulphur, Louisiana, and they're mobile. Even better, you can get a quote right from your mobile phone at asapglassco.com. ASAP Glass is owned and operated by two of my best friends, lifelong friends, Dan and Kayla Smith. Dan the Glass Man will make sure his team of glass technicians gets to your job ASAP and make sure it's done right so you can keep that windshield crack out of sight. If you do get that rock chip and you don't take care of it ASAP, that's okay. ASAP Glass does complete windshield replacements. Remember, ASAP Glass is mobile, so you don't have to worry about finding time to drop your vehicle off at their shop. You get your quote at asapglassco.com. Make your appointment with Kayla, and then before long, an ASAP Glass van is on its way to your location. That's it. I know you're probably looking at a rock chip right now. Don't wait. Take care of it ASAP. Go to asapglassco.com on your mobile device and get a quote. That's asapglassco.com. And make sure to tell Dan and Kayla you heard about ASAP Glass on Find the Good News. There's something missing in the story. I don't know what it is. The Marvel really captured.
Yeah.
They've always been good at that, and they really did that with a lot of those movies, I think, where you felt the person. Like that's what I was always looking for, the heart inside of the suit, you know?
Yeah.
Not just like, okay, he's got cool powers, but like there's a person there.
They had, like, I think some of the best movies, like Spider-Man Homecoming was
wonderful,
amazing.
man.
And it's because of that, like exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
They actually had the character grew, and they gave you his background. And yeah, that movie was amazing. But a lot of the other Avengers movies, short of Guardians of the Galaxy and Thor Ragnarok, 'cause anything Taika Waititi does, I'm very much into.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the Captain America movies didn't really excite me much. Logan, I felt like was probably the worst movie I've ever seen.
You didn't like Logan? The old man Logan?
It was like a X-Men movie for Radiohead fans.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And I'm not a Radiohead fan, so I just couldn't.
That's funny, man.
Oh yeah, Logan.
But maybe that'll change once that that franchise is brought back under the.
I think I'm done with Wolverine too. I don't want.
We've been fed a lot of it, though.
I'm glad you do this in a month, because otherwise people will be busting down the door. But yeah, I want my Gambit. I want Gambit, and I want him done right. Not so much Tatum doing it. I want my Gambit done right, and I want Wolverine kind of put it more of as a background character.
Yeah, it's interesting. What we're talking about gets into all the other stuff that we've talked about before. I mean, we like Spider-Man, right? I mean, and we see Spider-Man, and as the viewer, we get the glimpse under the mask. Now, when would we like Spider-Man as much if we didn't know Peter Parker? Would we like Superman as much if we didn't know Clark Kent? Would we like Batman as much if he were just this guy we heard about in the news that was, if you look at it from a not knowing the guy under the mask perspective, he's just a shadow that shows up and beats up on villains. Spider-Man's way off in the distance, and he caught some bad guys. Superman swoops in, saves the day, and he's gone.
And you saying that, I should answer your point first. I definitely agree with you. Peter Parker, for sure. Batman's a little bit of a weird one because he puts off that jerk persona. Everybody always complains about, like, oh, Ben Affleck's such a tool and he's going to be playing Batman. Well, Bruce Wayne's supposed to be a tool, so it's actually a perfect casting.
Yeah, I think Batman's a major broken guy.
Yeah,
like that's the character.
but kind of going back into some stuff you were saying earlier, it's like everything the movies are trying to do nowadays is they're trying to make the bad guy sympathetic instead of actually fleshing out the good guys. All the backstories are about why the evil villain who's committing these genocides are so sympathetic, and that is what our society. It's like Man of Steel, I felt like, was written for people who already know the story of Superman, and so they didn't tell the story of Superman, but what they're doing is they're telling the kids why this person is so angry, why this villain is the way he is. What they have that new Joker movie
with
out.
Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah, and so it is. It's teaching our kids and our teenagers this is why the villain is understandable. And it's like, should we really be doing that?
I see what you mean. Yeah, how much sympathy for the devil do you want to have, right? I mean,
yeah, and that's that pendulum that society always kind of has. And
see, that's like interesting. Like Breaking Bad was another one of those shows that kind of did that really well. Where, but with that show, I don't think what I got from it ultimately, my biggest takeaway was that you don't need to have a lot of sympathy for this guy because he actually is a pretty bad dude. He's done a lot of bad things. I mean, you start off with a little bit of sympathy and you can say, well, I can see how somebody could go here, but ultimately that story is just a big tragedy.
It's not a story where you're like, oh, I could totally become that. Hopefully. If you do say that,
right,
then you can call 337-478-1411. It's New Horizons Counseling Center. We'll be happy to work with you.
That's definitely not a path you want to take. I mean, that's a story of watching somebody fall down, not stand up.
Yes, yeah, that was a great show, though.
It was great. It was. I do see what you mean, though. I kind of feel like that, too. I think that we want our good guys to look more like bad guys. I really think, I hope that we see a change in the world like that, because I even think right now, and God, this is going to sound political. I mean, maybe it is. I don't know. But I think we're starting to do that. We're starting to go, hey, I like a loudmouth. I like somebody who says mean things. We need to celebrate somebody who's, got a lot of gusto and bravado and machismo. And I go, well, I don't know, because if we start celebrating that and we start saying that's okay, then that's what all our heroes are going to start looking like, and a lot of people are going to want to emulate that.
Yeah, I mean, even politically, I mean, we're at the point where people who are saying, hey, let's be a little bit more rational and let's try to find common ground, those people are now being ostracized as centrists.
Sure.
And it's like, whoa, what is going on? We're now hating the people who want to make compromises.
Yeah.
And, you even see stuff where they're like, centrist or even worse than the people on the other end of the political spectrum from me. And it's like, how is that even, how do you think that way? But that's actually a really great segue into plugging your show, because that's one of the other things I do with therapy is I really like music therapy and art therapy, and somebody who's licensed in art therapy and music therapy will probably be like, man, you're just using the surface of what we do. Art therapists and music therapists are really great at what they do. And so I do kind of take some surface stuff from them. And that's that you surround yourself with positivity. People do need to start surrounding themselves with more positive media. And so whenever you sent the invite for the show, I was like, man, that is an awesome message for a show to have. This is exactly what it needs. And
glad to hear you say that.
Yeah, and this is what I push on my clients all the time. I'm very much a ska punk person. I don't know if any of you people out there listen to Less Than Jake and some of those other ones. And I don't, I always have this kind of bubbly, happy personality, and I don't know if that attracts me to bands like Less Than Jake, or if it's Less Than Jake that's kind of made me bubbly and happy. But I'm definitely a firm believer in that what we kind of make ourselves listen to or watch is going to affect the moods that we're in. And so a lot of these darker movies coming out, or like the darker political stuff that people are getting into, you see these people are generally very unhappy and angry and have a lot of negative emotions. And so it's trying to surround yourself with more positive.
We watched this weekend Black Klansman by Spike Lee. Have you seen that movie?
Great movie. I love that movie.
That was a wonderful movie. It was a good movie. But what really, my teenage son, I let him watch it with us because he's got an activist heart, and I said, you should watch this with us. And man, he was like, Dad, I don't know if I can listen to the things they're saying. I said, unfortunately, that is how people talked. And I said, and actually, unfortunately, people are talking like that again.
Yes.
And I said, and this is why I think it's good. Sometimes it's good to watch a story like that to remind yourself, like, that is out in the world, and your best weapon against that is to not be it, and to just feed yourself information that connects you with other people and lets you see the other as just as valuable as you are in the human race. And it's because, you know, what's happened to these guys in this film is they've clustered together and they're just sort of self-feeding. Like, then it's this sort of battery that's just looping in on itself.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Becoming more rabid and more shut off. You know, and that's all the information they want is what they allow in, and that's it. It becomes self.
And that's segregation in a nutshell. You know, a lot of, like, if people tried to tell us things growing up about people that were different than us, and we're sitting there, they're in our classroom, and these people that have skin color that's different, and they're saying these things, it's like, that's dumb. They're in our classroom. We can see that's different. But whenever you have that segregation happen, you know, you start telling these stories, and people actually believe it. You know, they actually believe that there are these differences, and it's like,
I remember when my kids were younger, my little girl, when she's not a little girl anymore, she's a woman now, but I remember her coming home from school, and I remember my wife asked her if there were any black kids in class. You know, because we lived in a town that had kind of some racial issues at the time. And she said, well, how many black kids are in your class? And I remember this, my little girl looking at her like confused by the question. And she was like, I don't know, what do you mean black kids? And my wife was trying to explain what she meant, and she was like, well, there's this kid and she's brown though, and then there's this little girl and she's got blonde hair. And I was like, and I remember thinking how fascinating, how we can change generation to generation. She didn't know what that question meant.
Yeah,
she was going, that's a color, what does that have to do? I don't know if there's any kids that are black.
Yeah,
but there's a brown girl and this girl has yellow hair. You know, it was just like, it was fascinating to me. And I said, man, wouldn't that be interesting if we all
and I think,
like that.
And I think I have the problem of going a little bit to the other end of the spectrum. I went to still go to a church that is predominantly white, and I think whenever a black family would come in, they'd be like, why is that kid staring at us so creepily? And if anything, I was like, man, I want to go really welcome them. I really want to make sure that they want to stay here. And I noticed I actually got to counsel some transgender clients.
Okay.
And now they have a person at the office who actually has specialization. They work with transgender clients, and so I don't have as many anymore. But I think I had that tendency to do the same thing there, is that it's like I wanted to be a little bit too welcoming, come on a little bit too strong, like, oh yeah, hey.
Yeah.
And they're probably like, man, this guy's creepy, like, what's he doing? So it really is interesting how my hope is that as the younger generations do get older and kind of take over, that a lot of that stuff's gonna, I mean, it'll never go away, but just get better to where it is not even abnormal to have somebody of different whether it's LGBT or whether it's different skin colors, nationalities, religions being around you. I think in this area we have such a disparity in religion, so it's hard to find it's really hard to connect yourself with people of Hindu faith or a Muslim faith, and so we almost have a little bit of a segregation happening there. Not that we're it's being forced, but there's just not a lot of that.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of diversity. You're right. No, it's true. Yeah. I've always kind of struggled with that living in this area, because my interests have always taken me outside of what would be considered the standard around here. Which I'm just going to throw Christianity as the blanket word, but even under that umbrella, there's so much variety. But if you're interested in something that's outside of that, really books or traveling outside the area, or clustering up with maybe just the few individuals that have common interests around in the area, that's really all you're going to get. You're not going to find, a Zen center in Lake Charles, or at least not to my knowledge,
No, exactly.
Or, a Hindu temple or anything like that.
And I'm happy, I know it. I'm helped.
Do you ever hear a good song on the radio that just moves you? Maybe it stirs your heart, but then it starts to move your body too? Do people around you say things like, you've got rhythm, or where do you get your energy? Well, I've got a secret for you. That might be your dance coming out, and the whistle stop dance sport might be just the job your dance is looking for. I know your first thought, but I don't have any dance experience. That's one of the good things about this opportunity.
You don't need years of dance experience to do it. What Whistle Stop Dance Sport is searching for is a multi-dimensional talent. What does that mean? Okay, I'll tell you. You see, dance goes far beyond formal training, though that is a plus. Being able to dance means you can take life by the hand and let it put one arm around your waist and move to the rhythms that flow your way. To be a dance instructor at Whistle Stop Dance Sport, you'd need to have experience working with children, good rhythm, positive energy, and a personality for people. Dance Sport works to enrich children's lives by offering social, emotional, behavioral, and cognitive skills that naturally build confidence. Through dance, these children develop self-esteem, express themselves creatively, and strengthen critical thinking skills. Does the thought of affecting young lives in a positive way stimulate your mind, your heart? Do you want to do something that matters? Something that could really change the course of a young person's life? Then maybe that's why you heard about this dance instructor position with Whistle Stop Dance Sport. You can send your resume or letter to Whistle Stop Dance Sport, 1518 18th Street, Lake Charles, Louisiana, 70601. That's 1518 18th Street, Lake Charles, Louisiana, 70601. Training dates for this position start in July 2019, so if you feel you may be right, don't wait to send in your resume. If you'd like to hear more about this position, call Whistle Stop Dance Sport at 337-515-7577. That's 337-515-7577. And if you do call, do me a favor and let them know you heard about this on Find the Good News.
Yeah, and I wish that we could be at the point where my kids don't even see a turban and say to them, "Hey, Dad, why is that guy wearing a turban?" I kind of wish it'd be to where it just isn't even weird to them. But nowadays, if we did see somebody wearing a turban, I'd have to be like, "Hey, guys, that's their religion, and this is something." And I wish I didn't have to explain that.
It's funny because this is another comic book sci-fi type answer for this that I thought of when I may have even talked about it on the show. But I said, when I was a kid, I would watch Star Wars and I loved it, right? So, I mean, I'm 5-6 years old. And so seeing a human interact with a tall, 7 foot tall, hairy guy, and then, granted the hero's the blonde haired, blue eyed guy, but, his mentor is a little short green guy with pointy ears. And then when they go all into a room together, everybody's different. They're different races. They're different creatures. That was very normal. And so in my head, I guess as a kid, I thought, well, that's sort of the way it ought to be, right? These people all live together and do together, and they're all just different together from different places, but nobody's angry at another group. Yeah, or exactly. Maybe that's why nerds. Well, I was about to make this horrible comment of nerds maybe have inclusion down better than other people, but there's also a lot of bigotry in nerdism. So that would be the most untrue statement I could have said. Or Star Trek Discovery is. Oh, sure, there you go. See, I'm a Trekkie. Star Wars is okay, but I mean it's not anywhere near in the galaxy of Star Trek. Star Trek's just amazing. Well, you got a different social structure too in Star Trek too. I mean, a utopia type atmosphere as far as the. And I've always been Star Trek first, and Deep Space Nine is like my favorite one. But Star Trek Discovery to me is like maybe one of the best Star Treks that's ever been put out there. That show is amazing. I haven't gotten to the second season yet, so I might be. Maybe I'm saying something and then the second season just totally bombs, then I change my mind. But and in that show, there's a lot of female lead in that show, just a lot of women leading and women of color, and it's done in a way where to me, when people are talking to me about it, it's like, oh, I didn't even notice, it's just very good that they can kind of pioneer that, and I don't pioneer that, but there's probably other shows that have done that too. But it's just really cool that they can, they have that inclusivity, and that's kind of what. Well, it gives you an idea that maybe, granted, who knows, but it gives you this idea that, hey, maybe at some point in our future, we can get over some of these things that are causing division. Right. It's the 24th century, and women are actually allowed on starships. I think that they actually had in the original series, they actually did have a statement like that women couldn't be captains in Starfleet. Oh, really? And so it's basing that on the culture of the time. Yeah, that was done in the 60s. And to be fair, Star Trek has always pushed progressive views and have always kind of
push that, but that's something they even had in the original series, that I think they made that statement that women couldn't be captains. And
so who was it the other day? We were talking about Star Trek. Oh, my son came home, and I don't know, one of his teachers or something, Star Trek came up, and they said, well, the creator of Star Trek was a utopist, so I mean, you really can't listen to what they say. And I was like, interesting that the idea of utopia is thrown off. It's another label to use to shut someone down. It's like, oh, you're a utopist. I was like, that's so funny. We just gave a name. We just another nasty word to call somebody when it's what utopia is not. Isn't that an ideal?
Yeah, it's different. They have, I think, the term they use in the Star Trek field when they're debating communism versus capitalism is post-scarcity. So Star Trek is supposed to be post-scarcity. They have these replicators now, and so there's no more scarcity, and so it could be a utopian society because nobody wants it anymore.
There's no
Everybody
need.
has their needs. And when you start thinking about it, it's I don't know how I feel about it. On one hand, I love it. On one hand, I love the utopian society part of it. Nobody having to actually have to scrounge around to have food and to have basic needs, medical needs, things like that. On the other hand, being a counselor, it's really weird because when I first started in the psychology field, I worked at Volunteers of America, which is a very, very great business. It's probably one of the only places I've ever seen that actually is their heart's in the right place, and it's a nonprofit organization, and it actually is nonprofit, and everything goes to the people, and it's just a good place. So if you're donating money or time, Volunteers of America is a great place to do that too. But we would work with the lower income mentally ill, and so this would be a lot of the homeless population, people with schizophrenia, not able to work, and we'd get them connected with services. We get them in housing. We would provide housing. I was even an apartment manager at one point. We get them involved with doctors and medicine, and I'd never seen anyone make that leap of just self-fulfillment more than when they started volunteering or working. And so the post-scarcity thing, it's like there's a lot of things that I love about it, but then there's a lot of things that scare me because we know how society is. So there's going to be a lot of people, but I mean, that's how, so part of it makes me afraid that it's going to take away some of that edge, like WALL-E. We're going to be humans.
That's what I was thinking, right?
Just like in WALL-E, but I guess every society always has that yin and yang to it, and so we won't have people hopefully dying of starvation and diseases that can be cured, but then you are going to have people that kind of take advantage of it in the WALL-E sense. And I guess having the WALL-E people is better than having people starving to death. So
this is a good question. Yeah, like if all your basic needs, I mean, this gets back to kind of this discussion that you're hearing right now about, basic income, for everybody. Like, what would that look like? What would a basic income for everybody look like? And so all base needs are taken care of. I guess the real question is if that were the case, do people get better or do they get lazier? I mean, right? I mean, is that, if your needs are taken care of, do you just go, cool, I'm just going to relax? Or do you go, hey, I'm going to really use this time to seek more and evolve the species?
And I guess you're always going to have both. And so, but that is, and so it's going to be really interesting what happens when we do get to that post-scarcity place, and at some point I don't know if it'll be soon or it'll be far advanced, but it'll be interesting.
Man, this has been a good conversation, man. It's a lot of fun. I had no idea where we were going to go with this.
Those are the best ones, right? I always go off on really weird tangents.
I don't think any of it was all that strange, though. I think it's just relevant. I mean, it makes me realize that, as a counselor listening to you, it's like you're able to really reappropriate anything, right? You can look out in the world, whether it be entertainment or whether it be something you see on the news or just an interaction you have with somebody. There's probably some kind of juice to be squeezed out of that to utilize in your profession.
That's what I try to do. I have you have to do that. So when I'm working with kids, I'm trying to find what they're paying attention to. And so if I have a girl who is just being really mean to her siblings, but she's really into Disney princesses, then I try to reappropriate that. And so we're going to find a Disney princess that I want her to role play, which actually, it's actually a bit harder than you think, because Jasmine didn't listen to her parents. Ariel ran away from home. But Sophia the First is one of the new ones, and she's a great one. And a lot of times the kids watch that, and it's like, hey, be like Sophia the First. When it comes to boys, it's superheroes. And there it is again. You don't want your kid to emulate Wolverine. You don't want to be Iron Man, the drunk. So you're pretty much left with Captain America. I mean, even Spider-Man's kind of a weird one, because he's such a wisecracker, and usually you're wanting your kids to not be like that.
Right,
so even Spider-Man, you're not really wanting to emulate. And so Captain America is one I use. One that I've been using a lot lately with teenagers is My Hero Academia. I don't know if you've seen that anime.
No,
It's a great anime. Lots of kids watching it, and it's probably one of the most wholesome, just great messages I've seen in an anime. And so it's on Hulu. So if you're getting your kids into something, My Hero Academia is a great one. But even have an adult who hasn't been diagnosed with autism, but probably should be, that I've been working with a long time, and he is obsessed with politics, and which is a bad thing, because he's obsessed with politics to a side that's not winning right now.
I see. Okay.
And so he's got a lot of paranoia and a lot of social anxiety, and it's just negativity and depression. And so it is. But that's his language. That's what he speaks, and so it's trying to find some way to appropriate that into that world. And so that's basically what I try to do, is I try to connect with people in their medium, like we were talking about doing the bullying thing with the D&D stuff. I try to find the medium. If a kid comes in, he's really into baseball, it's trying to find baseball analogies that I can use to kind of help with that. And so that's a hard one whenever you have somebody that's obsessed with politics. And then some of the other ones that have been a little bit harder is when I have kids come in and they don't really watch any TV shows, they just watch YouTube.
Oh,
and it's like,
so it's like, where is that? Right?
Yeah, I don't even know these people. Have almost no knowledge of this stuff, and I don't know if any of them are good role models. But
That's
generally
interesting, man. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, to try to get your arms around YouTube, that's a...
Yeah, and so but I'm trying to find a medium that I can work with the person in.
Yeah,
basically.
So that's interesting. I mean, as far as autism goes, I don't know a lot about it technically, and I hear the word a lot, but I've encountered people who I've been told have autism, and so I guess that just looks very broad to me. And so I don't fully understand sometimes.
Because it's gotten very broad. I would imagine within the next decade or so, it'll probably get cramped back down. So when we were kids, it was like charters were everywhere, right? And it was like addiction was like the big thing, and charters were everywhere. And then they kind of brought that back down. And then as we were growing up, it was like everybody was ADHD,
yeah, right.
And I'll tell you right now, 80% of people diagnosed with ADHD are not ADHD. But then after that, because I was actually a band director for 2 years. Really? I was the assistant band director at Sulphur High School.
Oh,
so
wow.
The head of the 9th grade campus. And when I was teaching, it was bipolar disorder. All the kids had bipolar disorder, right? And so, autism is kind of the big thing. It really has kind of ballooned to encompass... it's kind of ballooned to encompass even people that have minor social skills issues, and I'll meet with the people. It's kind of like, these social skills issues are very minor, and so I don't know if I would diagnose them with autism. The way the diagnosis works is you could just go around from doctor to doctor to doctor, and so you could have 9 people not diagnose you with autism, and then you find one that does. But there definitely is autism, and it's definitely an area that needs to be worked with. It needs to be there needs to be more funding put there. I work with a lot of adults that have autism, and when they're kids, there's a lot of services for them, and then it's like once they turn 18, there's just not a lot. So they can go to schools, and they have they have that social setting in schools and stuff like that, and then they become adults, and they might not be functional enough to be independent or maintain a job, and then now there's not really even social things that they can go and do, and so a lot of times they might live with their parents or their grandparents, and there's no outlet for them.
Sure.
And so that's when we started doing D&D groups. And actually the first... So I have almost no free time. When I do get free time, I try to game with my friends. We usually do those little 1 hour games like Munchkin, King of Tokyo, those little board games now. Almost like Hero Quest back in the day when we were growing up. So when I first started doing those groups, that was kind of my vision at first, was doing those games with adults with autism and kids with autism. And so we started doing this D&D group with autistic adults and autistic children. And from there, it kind of ballooned into now we have a kind of a high school group for kids with anger management and ADHD issues.
Wow, man.
And we also have an adult group for depression that's kind of like a support group. And so right now we have 4 groups. We're talking about turning it into 6 because it keeps growing. And so we basically are using role-playing games to help people with all kinds of issues.
Why do you think the role-playing helps so much?
I think when it comes to autism, I think that is one of the biggest aspects that they might not have down. So when we as people that don't have autism are kind of going through our day, we put on different roles. And so when I'm a parent, I'm playing this parent role, and then when I'm doing a podcast, this is actually my first podcast, but I have my podcast hat, right? When I'm a counselor, I have a different hat. I probably have different counselor hats for each client. And even when I was a band director, I had a different hat on, and I think that's the difficulty that a lot of people diagnosed with autism have, is putting on those different hats. And so they literally just go through the day just wearing the same hat, and a lot of them don't fit other situations. And so we start off kind of letting them make their own character, and they usually make a character kind of like themselves or what they want to be. And then we start to kind of push them into characters that they wouldn't normally be.
Interesting.
So I might have a kid who is, I say kid, I have a few that I've been counseling for like 5 or 6 years, and they're like 25 or 26, I call them my kids. And one who's obsessed with the macabre, very dark stuff, talks about suicide all the time. And he's not suicidal, but he just talks about it because that's just in his vernacular. And so I might push him to become a priest healer who doesn't talk about that kind of stuff. And so it kind of gets him to I might have somebody that talks all the time, and then I give him a mute character.
Interesting.
Or have somebody who's not who doesn't talk enough, and have them be somebody who's kind of like the group leader. Maybe they're the bard or something, where they have to talk a little bit more. And so it teaches them how to put on those different hats, all the while getting that socialization in, because I do believe that socialization is probably one of the most important aspects to our day-to-day life.
This is interesting. So I can totally see how that could work. I mean, so if you're a person, even for somebody who doesn't have autism or whatever, I can see the value in adopting an identity or taking on the traits of something you're weak in.
Yes.
I don't know. It's the only way I can think of it. Like if you're not a good public speaker, you can say, well, I'm going to play the part of a public speaker, and then I'm going to go out and do the things, but it's not me. I'm just playing the part. And by playing the part, you're doing the things that just rubs off on you. I mean, to some degree, I mean, you're flexing muscles that you just didn't know you had.
That's it. And when I envisioned this, when I first was thinking about it, I really wanted to get to the point where they were so comfortable. We were just this group and this close-knit thing, and we were so comfortable that I wanted to start doing like maybe one weekend we would have like a social skills scavenger hunt. And so one of the things on it might be that you have to go to a grocery store and ask an assistant for help finding something. And another thing might be you go find somebody that you can assist in some way. And it's like this little scavenger hunt. So we'd split up into teams and go off and do that, and little games like that. So in school, they teach us that your recovery environment is the people around you, and they teach us that your recovery environment is very important and that you want to help your clients build that positive recovery environment. And then that's all they say. They kind of leave it at that. And so when I first started working with the lower income mentally ill, and so it might have been people that had learning disabilities, or people that are homeless, people that had been isolated for 20 or 30 years, being this young kid that was ready to get them going again, it was like, well, let's go make friends. And so if you were a person who was very creepily approached at Books A Million between the years of 2009, 2013. That's probably my fault. I apologize. I was probably in the back somewhere pushing my clients to go and introduce themselves to you, and I apologize for that. It's like a learning curve, and so we definitely learned that's not a good way to make friends. And so the biggest factor of whether two people will become friends, it's not common interests, it's not race, it's not religion, it's actually just proximity. The more time you spend with somebody, the more likely you will become close to them and become a friend. And once you leave high school and you don't have a job, you don't have proximity with anybody.
Yeah.
And so that's the other thing that I really want with these groups is a lot of my autists, especially the adults, they're so self-isolated that we actually have a group me chat where everybody's involved in it. And so they actually get a little bit of socialization throughout the week from that.
You can see the value of being around people in so many different ways. Like I see people that I know that are close to me, not relatives or anything, but just people who are in my life, where you can see the patterns of isolation, and then the longer that isolation stays that way, it almost becomes self-perpetuating. Like they become even more isolated, and then they drag other people into the isolation with them, which really probably doesn't sound like isolation, but it could be like almost like a family. Mm-hmm. You brought up homeschooling, and so like you could see these sort of things happening where it's like, okay, so now the kids are no longer in public school, and now they've shut their family out, and now there's no relatives, now there's no neighborhood friends. It's just like this isolated little unit. Mm-hmm. And it's just, I don't know, it just becomes more bizarre.
And a lot of times whenever those kids come to me for counseling, the kids they feel like they're adults. And so they're either not listening to their parents, they're becoming very, they either they feel like they can do adult things, and so they're kind of having arguments with their parents, or it's just the emotional regulation. So emotional regulation, we learn from school a lot of time. I mean, really, we learn a lot of stuff from school. You know, if you have a 3-year-old that's still using pacifier, the thought is as soon as they start going to pre-K and see the other kids don't have pacifiers, they stop using it. And that's true. They see that very quickly. A lot of times potty training, you might have kids who are potty training a little bit late. As soon as they start going to school and they start seeing the other kids are potty training, boom, they potty train. Especially speech. There's a lot of kids that have a lot of speech delays. And as soon as they start going to pre-K and they hear other kids speaking, they start trying really hard to speak.
I was just talking about this with my daughter. My daughter said, "Guy, I remember you tell me this," because I remember. So up till the time right before she started kindergarten, she spoke like this. It was just that, and I mean, I knew what she meant, but it wasn't English. I don't know what it was. It sounded like some kind of little alien gibberish. Yeah. And when she gets to school, I was really sweating it. I was like, how is she going to communicate with kids? She hadn't really been around a lot of kids. I was worried. Mm-hmm. And so I remember I tell everybody, I said, but she went to school, and it was like it was like someone waved a wand over her head. She started coming home, and I was like, where was this the whole time?
And see, pre-K, kindergarten, those are the best times to learn that. Once you start getting to 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, then you're starting to talk about when you do something embarrassing, people remember that even in high school.
Oh, yeah.
And so if you're learning those things early, because I mean, they don't, not everybody goes to pre-K anymore. They've made it to where I think only the under a certain poverty line goes to pre-K, and it's only half the kids. And so you're starting to lose some of those years, because if you haven't gotten that normalization down by 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, then they remember that, and you've already become that social outcast.
Man, that's pretty wild. I guess I didn't even consider that till you said that. Now it's kind of got my mind blown that that's what it was. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was like it seemed like just a switch flipped.
We learned so much from our from social aspects. I mean, even in high school, by the time you get to high school, that's when you're starting to get to, I think it's Erik Erikson has the stages of development. And before high school, you're just trying to learn what you're good at, industrialization versus inferiority, I think it is. And so you're basically trying to learn what you're good at and what you're not good at. And then by the time you hit 13 and you're going into high school, that's when it's identity versus role confusion. And so that's where you're learning where you fit in and basically who you are. And at that age, so usually, if I see a bad kid, middle school, elementary school, a lot of times you could trace it back to the parent. Parenting has a lot to do with that. It's like 50-50, right? And then once you start getting into high school, it's your friends. Parents don't have that much control anymore. I'd say it's almost 70% friends, 30% control from the parents, because your friend group just becomes so important. And you could have kids who are great and they just start hanging out with the wrong crowd, and all of a sudden you see them start to veer towards that crowd. And it's because we really undervalue how much that social group plays that role in shaping you in high school.
It's funny. It just got me thinking about something totally not related, but I used to do screen printing, and they called it color migration. And so if you had a red t-shirt and you were going to put a white imprint on that shirt, if you weren't careful, what they would always show you is like, well, you got to put white on there 2 or 3 times, because it may look white, but tomorrow when you come back in here, that white's going to look just pink.
It washes a little pink.
Yeah, it's going to look pink. And I said, well, why? It said the color migrates from one to the other. Even if it doesn't matter what you do, you can't stop it. And it just makes me think about how a friend group or anybody around is really what's happening. I mean, you get in there, unless you're just completely shelled up, I mean, then what's the point of being in a friend group, right? I mean, you're going to get some of that migration.
I mean, whether you believe in creationism or evolution, I think there's something kind of innate put inside us that once you start hitting about 14, 15, 16, that there's like almost this mechanism inside us that wants to distance ourselves from our family. I think it's that wanderlust that makes us want to go out and make our own way. And so you see around 14, 15, that's when a lot of kids start to have that kind of they either start doing things that makes a little bit of a rift between their parents, or the bonds just aren't there as much, and they start wanting to be around their friends a lot more. And I think that's kind of the natural way of saying, hey, it's getting close to time to leave the nest. I mean, heck, back in olden days, you'd already be leaving the nest at that age. And so that's kind of when it's like biology kind of pushing us out a little bit, ejecting us.
We used to have rituals for that. I mean, a long time ago, it was like, at a certain age, you had to go do these things, to become an adult. And we're missing a lot of that in the world. We don't have those sort of rites of passage, I guess, in us anymore.
Yeah, it's weird. Biology's weird, like when you're because I think there are things like that happen that's pushing us out when we're 13 or 14, right? There's a lot of hormones and like our sexual organs are kind of becoming developed at 13 or 14, and then our brains aren't fully becoming developed until like our later 20s, and so it's like you have some things that are making us turn into adults when we're 13, 14, 15, then you have other things that make it to we're not really adults till we're 26, 27, and that's kind of the joke about how we're created or how we evolved.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, and you can see why there's a lot of problems with that kind of thing too. I mean, especially when you have as a teenager, you're making decisions when your body's becoming an adult and you're making decisions, but your brain's not quite ready to be making those decisions.
Right.
It's where a lot of pain can come from.
Exactly. And now we're the old people that look around saying, those kids, right? They don't have it figured out. Back in our day, we did.
That's every generation. That's right.
Yeah.
And this has been really interesting. I'm fascinated by everything you talked about.
And I'm happy. I know it.
This episode's Fishing for Goodies fishbowl sponsor is Brimstone Museum and Henning Cultural Center in Sulphur, Louisiana. I don't know what you look for when you travel, but one of the things I look for when I'm putting together my itinerary is a unique museum or gallery in the city I'm traveling to. I do this almost every time I go to a new city, but if I'm being honest, I'm guilty of not always doing that very thing right here at home in Sulphur, Louisiana. That's really a shame, because we have one of the most interesting, historically relevant, and culturally rich corners in any city in the country about 2 minutes from where I'm sitting right now. I'm talking about the Brimstone Museum and Henning Cultural Center. Have you ever really thought about why our city is named Sulphur? They've got a permanent exhibit on the history of the sulfur industry that answers that simple question and more. You really get a full scope of just how important the sulfur mining industry was to the development of Southwest Louisiana and the impact it had on the rest of the world. Yes, the rest of the world.
On the same property, right next door to the museum, is the Henning Cultural Center, presenting some of the most interesting, modern, and culturally relevant local art shows I've ever seen. My dear friend Tom Trahan and the Brimstone Historical Society have really worked hard to give us this treasure, and it's a multifaceted jewel that I plan to take advantage of more often. You don't have to wonder what their hours are or how to get there or what shows are coming up. Just go to brimstonemuseum.org like I did and subscribe to their mailing list right there on the homepage. That's brimstonemuseum.org. Tom will make sure you start getting the announcements for each and every new show at the gallery. But you don't have to wait for the mail to arrive to enjoy this historical local treasure. You don't have to be guilty, like me, of overlooking a local wonder that conveniently sits next to the Grove, one of the most beautiful walking parks in Southwest Louisiana. Drop in and say hi to Tom for me. Tour the museum and center, and make sure to tell Tom that you heard about Brimstone Museum on Find the Good News. Now, let's take that dive in the fishbowl. So you have to listen to this show, you said.
I want to.
Well, I'm going to tell you, then you don't know about that fishbowl.
I do not know about the fishbowl.
We do, at this time of the show, every guest draws 3 questions out of the fishbowl.
Okay.
They're put in there. Some of them I put in originally kind of to seed it, but now it's been guests and some gaming cards.
Okay.
All kinds of stuff in there. So what we do is you draw 3, you read it, and then we'll discuss it.
Yeah, and I'll say this just to defend myself a little bit is I want to listen to the show. Before I had the quintuplets, I read avidly, read a bunch of stuff, and I was reading the Ender series, and I think there's like maybe 8 books in that series, and I made it to the last one, and then the Quints were born. I have been on the exact same book since the Quints were born.
Hey, I understand. So, I used to read like crazy, man.
Yeah.
And then, you know, kids, I mean, truly not like your situation, but kids, you know, kids in life. And so now a book takes me, I'll take a couple of months at least to go through a 100-page book because I can only read a little bit at a time.
I want to pick books back up again. I think video games too. The last video game I really got to sit down and play was like Halo 2. It's been a while. We bought Breath of the Wild for the Switch, and it's like I want to sit down and play it, but it's just I don't know when to put it.
For me, podcasts, I've got to where I listen to them a lot more because now I can think of a subject and go, let me go see if there's a podcast about that.
Nice.
And then just go down that rabbit hole when I'm driving. It's where it's not replaced reading, but it's definitely taking up some of my reading. I need to.
I'd surround when I'm driving, that is my sacred ska punk time to pep myself up. Less Than Jake. And then my wife recently turned me on to this band from the 90s that I don't know how isn't bigger. I never heard. Their name is Pain.
I've never heard of them.
Yeah, they're really bouncy. It's almost like Cake, but a little bit more bouncy and has this ska feel to it. It's really peppy. And I love it.
Does it get you in the right space?
Oh, always. Okay, so just dig around and
whatever you want, man. There's cards, papers.
Okay. Let's see. How could you reinvent yourself?
That's a big question.
It's a very big question. I don't know how I would. I kind of like where I'm at. If I had more time in the day, I would definitely work out a lot more, and try to be a little bit more athletic.
Is there like a path that you go, do you ever think about this? And I do.
Yeah.
And I obsess about it, but I always go, are there any like nodes in your life where you go, oh, right here, this was like a shift. Like I took a course shift.
That is, I'm definitely one of those ones that feels like everything that has ever happened in my life has kind of brought me to where I am. And I love where my kids are. I love my kids, all of them. I love my wife. She's amazing. If I could reinvent myself, I suppose I would try to reinvent a housekeeper. Maybe that could come in and do stuff. Oran can attest to you. I'm like this really healthy mix between Antonio Banderas, Denzel Washington, and George Clooney in their prime.
Okay, that's what you're seeing. Right? That's what I was going to in the description for the show.
Yeah,
for the folks that aren't going to be watching.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm not. I would definitely try to be a little bit more athletic. I'm comfortable where I am. I'm not the smartest person. I'm not the coolest person. I'm definitely comfortable in my awkwardness and my okay. Here's what I would say is if I can reinvent myself is sometimes I'm not able to get social enough with people. It's like with my friends, I haven't had that socialization in a long time because I'm just lacking that free time. And so whenever I do meet up with them, sometimes I get a little bit overboard with that picking, and it's wanting
like
to be
the friendly jabs. Is that kind of like
friendly jabs?
Yeah.
But I feel like whenever I leave, I feel like, man, that pie chart was definitely heavily favored on the jabs, and I needed to make it a little bit more on this, and I feel really bad about that. And so if I could reinvent anything, that would be it, is that I do a lot of the jabs less.
I can relate to that, man. I totally can. Like, I don't have a giant friend group, but I have like this small cluster of like guys and gals that I go, hey, those are really my good friends, but I don't see them that often, maybe 3-4 times a year. And when I do, I go through the same thing, because whenever we were around each other a lot, that was just in the mix, was the cutting up and picking and poking mixed in with other stuff, but it was on the reg.
Yeah.
But now that's not on the reg. It's like the jabbing and picking and poking is like a quick way to get get some good laughs going, but I'm heavily weighted in that category.
And they're all adults now. They don't go by their like I have my friend Michael Rivers. He was always Rivers. Now he's just Michael. Or my friend TJ Elsie's just Travis now. And so they're all like, my friend Joey Ledoux is William. He goes by his first name.
Okay.
The more professional William, now that he's a lawyer that graduated from Duke Law.
He's not Joey anymore.
Yeah, right. And so but I still have that youthful nature. I just want to pick on all of them. So.
Yeah, I got one friend who probably, I don't know if he'll ever listen to this, but I guarantee you he would agree with that. It's like, God, dude, you pick with me more than anybody, because I'm like, I know you get it though. He's like one of those few little safe spaces I can still stick that stuff.
Yeah. And the thing about the out of shape thing is I really wish I had just a little bit more of that energy that I had when I was in shape. Because, man, I mean, with 6 kids and working like I do, my wife also has ankylosing spondylitis. It's an autoimmune inflammatory disorder. And so there's a lot of times where she's kind of holed up and can't do a lot. And I just wish I had just a little bit more energy. And I know as we get older, we lose that, but also if I was a little bit in better shape, I think I'd have that more energy, kind of be able to push and do a little bit more stuff for it.
Yeah,
so.
I hear you, man.
Yeah.
That's stuff that's hard to change too, because I mean, some things just circumstances of life just make it to where it's not possible. I get it, man. I do.
Well, my thing, I actually had to where, so when I was a band director, I got to like 260. It's like the band director, like every band director you've ever seen has that gut, right? And so when I stopped, addiction's a really weird thing to me. About to piss off a lot more people. I don't see addiction as a disease. I see addiction as this kind of like behavior model. Like it's your behaviors, a pattern of behaviors, and some of them are a lot harder to extinguish than others. And so I always thought addiction was just BS. My friends and I grew up with like the metal crowd, the freaks, and friends were definitely heavily into drugs and stuff, and got my little college scholarship for a band that said you would be drug tested. It's like, well, I'm not gonna touch anything anymore. And I never had any addiction to anything. Like people would be like, hey, you want to try something? I'd be like, nope, I got the scholarship. Never had any urges. So I never believed in addiction. I never really felt like it was that big of a thing. And then I was sitting in this addictions class that Dr. Melville, brilliant guy, teaches at McNeese, and that's when I was sitting there, I realized I have this addiction to food. I mean, me and my friend Brandon, who still goes by Brandon, he doesn't go by William yet. That's his first name. But we were sitting there, and we were trying like every diet pill under the sun. We would have stuff shipped in from Canada that you couldn't even get in the U.S. anymore. And I was trying to lose weight, and we just couldn't do it. And that's whenever I looked at my eating like an addiction model and like a pattern of behaviors. And that year I got down to 200 pounds. It was really nice and fit and in shape. And I'd extinguished all these triggers. I was eating healthy. It's like I hate this term so much, but it really was a lifestyle change.
Okay.
And so everywhere I'd eat healthy, it wasn't even an effort. But every time I'd go back to my mom's house, it was like I was that fat kid in the pantry just stuffing myself in, right? Because I never got to extinguish that trigger. My parents bought that house when I was 6 months old, and I built up all those fat kid triggers there.
Wow.
And so when the quintuplets were born, and 6 months later we went through divorce, and I was the single dad half the time, and I bought my parents' house.
Did you really?
Yeah.
And so the trigger is like there.
I have yet to extinguish that trigger, and I cannot. My kids, they're very picky eaters, and I can't watch 6 plates have food on them still and not do anything with it. And so
interesting. I have a similar. That's so funny. I literally just talked about this on the episode of the show that comes out tomorrow.
Yeah.
I have a problem with that, with leftover food. I don't know what it is. It bugs me, and it'll gnaw at me. Like if I see,
or you gnaw at it.
Well, yeah. I mean, honestly, I could probably, if we go out to dinner somewhere, probably not order. If I was willing to sit back and wait for everybody else to get finished and then just eat everything they had left.
Totally could.
And I thought, God, I might even put that to test after we talked.
We went to Pensacola, and my wife's not the biggest foodie, and she doesn't realize how picky she is. My daughter, the 4-year-old, will eat more than the quintuplets combined. She'll actually eat. And so me and her would order this food, and then we at our hotel we had like the fridge and the microwave, and I'd be eating the leftovers and stuff. And then that last night comes up, and it's like there's like 3 meals worth of leftovers, and I'm like, well, that can't go to waste. And so I'm sitting there like trying to stuff down as much as I can. And we also have a black lab, this 90-pound black lab that's way too chunky, because I'm using her I've actually lost a couple of pounds, but it's because I'm using her to eat the food before I can eat it. And so if I could reinvent anything, it would definitely be that behavior, that eating behavior, and
interesting,
and letting stuff go to waste.
That bugs me. That just kills me. I know where mine comes from. I don't know if it's ever going to change. Yeah, but I found it. Like it's from something very young, but like it was an old magazine that just really affected me, from a National Geographic. It was about it's called Famine in the Horn of Africa, and I sat there and just stuck, man.
I know all the stuff that I have to do to lose weight. I know about MyFitnessPal. When I use MyFitnessPal, I lose weight every time. I know the mindfulness techniques. I teach mindfulness techniques. I love the Hindu mindfulness techniques, eating and just really focusing on everything. But when you're working 60 hours a week and you got 6 kids, it's just so hard.
Man.
So that would be it. That would be the first.
Man, I can relate to a lot of that. I mean, a whole lot of what you just said. I mean, maybe not word for word, but I can definitely see just like you said, schedule has a lot to do with it. I mean, when you're working, I'd love to say I work 40 hours a week, but it's not 40 hours a week. It's just not. I mean, it's always more. And
always, yeah.
Yeah, I get it, man. Man, that was a good question. That generated a lot of good discussion.
It was. I don't know if I really answered it. But
it's okay. Yeah. Most of the time, that's what happens, is these things just stimulate.
Okay, we'll go with a card this time.
Okay.
Things you can do to surprise your partner or a friend. My wife hates surprises.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, like if I told her, I think it's just the way, it's because she, with the ankylosing spondylitis, they have this kind of the spoon theory. And so the spoon theory is that when you wake up in the day, you have a certain number of spoons, and you can only use a certain number of spoons for certain tasks. And so if she wakes up and she's still going to college also, and so she's got college, that's going to take up 2 of her spoons, and maybe she's only got 4 spoons, so now she's got to figure out where those other 2 spoons will go. Okay. And it's a pretty cool theory, but she doesn't have a lot of spoons. She's taking medication to try to get the inflammation down and get better. And so if I just threw surprises at her, they almost never fit in.
I see.
With the spoons. But actually that might be what it is. Things you could do to surprise your partner or a friend. I could probably buy a hot tub, install a hot tub outside.
Ooh, that actually sounds nice.
That's not bad. Surprise a friend. So if I could go off on another tangent. Okay, so I don't know if you've ever read the book, The 5 Love Languages.
No.
Okay, it's an amazing book. I think the author is Gary Chapman, and it's usually I recommend it to most couples. If you're married, a couple you've probably heard of this book. The idea is that we all speak and interpret love and appreciation through 5 languages.
Okay.
The first one is physical touch, and so that would be by sex, but also rubbing shoulders, hands on the head, hugs, just kind of like cuddling next to each other. The second one is acts of service. And so that would be like, let's say that you're the person who usually does the yard work, but your wife sees that you just had this horrible week. She goes out and mows the lawn. She might be the one who usually does the dishes. You see that she had this really horrible day. You do the dishes for her. That's an act of service. That's a love language.
Okay.
The third one is... let's see, words of affirmation, saying positive things to each other, complimenting each other. Then the fourth one is quality time, which if you're a quality time person, it would be one-on-one, like how this is quality time. We haven't checked our cell phones this whole time. We haven't taken a break.
Right.
We're just sitting here. We're even making great eye contact, just staring lovingly into each other's eyes. That's great quality time. So that's amazing there. And then the fifth one is gifts, which people think is vain, but that really is the way that some people feel and show love and appreciation. It's gifts. And you're going to fit into one of these love languages. And so if I'm working with a couple, I might have this guy that works at the plants, and his love language that he shows people is acts of service. And he's working 60 hours a week. And when I talk to him, he doesn't want to work 6 hours a week. That's his love that he's showing to his family. Now I go and I work with his wife, and his wife, she feels it through quality time. That's how she feels love and appreciation. Maybe she shows her love language is physical touch, and she does a really good job of trying to make sure that she's just touching him and rubbing him and stuff, getting massages. But his love language might be gifts, and he handles all the finances. And so she doesn't get him gifts because he handles all the finances. She doesn't really know how much money they have.
I see.
So you have two people that just feel like they're showering each other with love and attention,
and then not receiving it right
at all. Yeah. And so it's trying to teach them how to do the love languages. Now I kind of adapted that a little bit, and whenever I had the quintuplets, it was like, how do I show this many kids enough attention? And so I started to look at the love languages. I'm teaching these couples how to do this kind of stuff, and I started to look at it with my relationship with my kids. It started with one of my kids. They were all premature, and so early steps would come in and work with them, and there was an occupational therapist that would come in and work with one of my sons, Owen, and when she would work with him doing the massage stuff, the physical touch, his anxiety would just be so much less, and that made me start to realize that he has a physical touch love language. And to this day, whenever I'm sitting there and I have my hands on him and he's like sitting on my lap and stuff, that's like his happiest. I have another son whose words of affirmation, but it has to be words of affirmation about his works. Like, I can't just tell him how great he is as a kid. I have to tell him how great his art is.
What he's manifesting is exactly good, not just him.
And the other son, the third son, it's actually him. I need to compliment him. If I'm complimenting his stuff, he doesn't feel it. It's him. I have another daughter who's very much into physical touch, another one who's quality time. And so when I learn their love languages, I can go home, and it usually takes me about an hour, 2 hours to fill them with that attention they need. And without using that, I might never be able to give them that attention.
That is fascinating.
And so going back to this question, sorry, that was a long segue. Things you can do to surprise your partner or your friend is, I have never really adapted that to where my friends are, because you could adapt that theory to coworkers. You could find out I'm a picker. And so sometimes I go too far, and I really tick off the ladies that I work with a lot of times by picking. And usually I kind of figure out what their love language is and do something to apologize. That's another thing I counsel kids on, is having a good apology game. If you go too far, that we can apologize to people quickly. But the ladies that currently work at the office I'm at now, they're very hard to figure out. They're not into gifts. They're almost always on diets, and they get mad if I get them food. And so things like that. It's figuring out people's love languages so that you could do a little bit more to build that connection with them, make them feel better.
That is interesting. I've had coworkers like that where I couldn't quite figure out how to connect with them, because I'm a picker too, and it's like, okay, usually that's fun. Some people enjoy that, and you get a little bit of laughter together, and it's a little jab back and forth. for me, that's always been a way to build relationships. But when I do encounter somebody and you go, that's not for them. That's not going to respond well to that. And then you start looking for their love language and you just can't seem to find it. That's difficult because we're never really going to fully connect.
Could be that they're a physical touch person and you're not the type of boss who's going to go and physically touch everybody, because
that's true. That's true.
How we should be. And so, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. Sometimes there's even, I think that I am a little bit of a physical touch person, but I've always been very uncomfortable with physical touch. I've come from a very big Catholic family. We're very close, but we're not huggers. And even in high school, I think people would actually tell me how horrible my hugs were. And so if somebody would come and put their hand on me, usually I have that defensive gesture.
Similar.
And but I've noticed when I was forcing myself to do the physical touch with Owen at first, because it never occurred to me that I need to be doing this. So I'm not forcing as in, it's disgusting touching my kids. It just never occurred to me, hey, you need to go and rub them right now.
Man, that's fascinating. I mean, it makes me realize more, and something I guess never really spoke it out loud, but is looking at other people as unique in that regard, and instead of just assuming and impressing upon them my own ways, is to always go, hey, they have their own ways. They have their own things inside of them that are causing things and having them react a certain way. Because I'm the same way. I'm not a big hugger and a big... Well, hang on. I back up. I love hugging my children. Mm-hmm. I hug my wife, but you get outside of that circle, I'm not just big on hugging and
I still haven't transferred that. I don't hug too many people.
Yeah, it kind of... I do it when I see it, somebody else is like offering that as a greeting or a goodbye. I will partake, right? Because that's their ritual, I think, and I try not to be awkward. But inside, a lot of times I am. I'm just not. It's just not a part of me to be that way.
And they say that in order to get the endorphins really released from a hug, you have to hug for at least 20 seconds.
Really? That's a long hug.
I can't, other than my family, I can't think of anyone I've hugged for longer than 20 seconds.
20 seconds a long hug.
That's
man.
A long hug.
That's a long hug if you're not a hugger.
Yeah.
I mean, a long 20 seconds.
Even if you're a hugger.
God, I'm going to start testing that too. Because I'm going to think about, again,
you'll notice it. Those endorphins, they release.
20 seconds.
Yeah.
Man, dude. A lot can happen in 20 seconds.
It is.
That's a long hug.
It's a long time. But, back in the day, it probably wasn't. That's just how we are now with this, the way our minds work.
Well, my wife's family, they're big huggers, and my family's not. And so when she and I first started dating, and I would go to her family events, they had a big family, big Catholic family, a lot of people, and they got together a lot. My family was the opposite. And she picked up on it pretty quick. She was like, "You look uncomfortable." I said, "Well, it's just everybody's just so many people." First of all, I said, "But everybody's hugging and kissing each other and and they'll sit and hug each other and talk to each other while they're hugging each other." And I was like, "This is so interesting."
Yeah, it's like,
I was kind of worried.
You're gonna have that hand on me all Thanksgiving dinner.
It's like, how you been? Like you're in a hug lock, and it's like in your ear, like, "How you been? Everything's been good." The kids, and patting your back.
You're thinking about that beef jerky you just ate on the ride over.
Yeah, like this is way more than 20 seconds.
But when you think about it, if you are a words of affirmation, or if you're a quality time person, there's so many times that we stop in, and I'm very guilty of this because of how just all over the place I am, is I might stop, and if you see me at Walmart, it's like a 1 minute conversation that I'm out of there, and all we ever get out is that superficial fluff. And so for a quality time person, you didn't do it for them. And so if you're a physical touch person, you're giving a hug for less than 20 seconds. That's like that pop-in at Walmart. You're not doing it for them.
And you see, I think some of that too, I can relate to some degree. I mean, you're a counselor, so you're in conversation, deep conversation on a lot of different dimensions with a lot of different people all the time. Even just doing this show is kind of like that. I mean, I might do I usually do 2 to 3 interviews a week, which isn't nowhere near what you're doing, but it's about an hour or two a piece. So when you have that many conversations that are not surface level, by the time I get to Walmart, I'm almost ready for it to be surface level. Does that make some kind of sense? I'm almost ready for it to go, okay, I've
it does
satiated to some degree my
That's not how I am. I'm very much, I could just talk to people all day long. I understand that there are people who aren't like me. So I have heard that people are like you. I think most people are kind of like you. There's a lot of counselors, there's a lot of burnout for that, because you sit there and you, you're talking to people, you go home and you're just not able to get that with your family.
Yeah, when your kid comes up and goes, hey, let me tell you about my day, you're kind of like, oh man, you're right.
What I'm guilty of is I'm just ready to get home and be with my wife. Like, if it's not so much, I could have this in-depth conversation with you. It's just, I'm just ready to get home and see my family and be at home and do other stuff. It's like, when I retire, I don't think that's ever, or maybe it's when my kids graduate. Is that when I have free time again? I've heard that. I don't know.
I don't know. Only one of mine's out of school, so
I could talk to people all day long. It's really just the time that makes me do the superficial. I'm running by real quick.
I've thought about this a little bit. Whenever first I'd read the book back in the mid '90s when it came out, the book Into the Wild about Chris McCandless, and then the movie came out, and I started thinking about it again. And I don't know why. I guess when I watched the movie, I picked it up more than I did when I read the book. But it was the allure. You said it earlier, wanderlust. It was like this, his lust to get away from society and to get away from people and to sort of be his own man and be alone. He wanted to do this. And at first, when I read the book, I was like, that appealed to me. I was like, oh, he's definitely appealing to this part of me, this escapism, I guess. But then when I watched the movie years later, when they did that, I was like, oh, I didn't catch this when I read the book. But what makes his story good is it's not his aloneness, it's his togetherness. It's all the story is all these wonderful relationships that he built along the way, these not surface relationships, but deep relationships. And that's where the book even came from, was the guy going around and talking to people who encountered him and had relationships with him. And then the end of the movie, of course, and in the book too, he says, life is meant to be shared. He finally realizes it. Mm-hmm. And I loved that, because I was like, I don't know where I'm going with that. I think there's both natures in a person.
I like that though, and I think when we're used to people, I think we get our rituals, right? And so like with my best friend, we'll go walking. He actually lives down the road from me, and we walk every night. But typically, it's been a long time since we've actually been able to hang out for hours. Usually we just sneak away from my family, and he gets out the house. We walk for like 10 minutes, and it's mostly that ritual fluff that we do. We talk about, it used to be Game of Thrones or the sports. He's my sports friend. And so we'll talk about football, we'll talk about basketball, and then we kind of part ways because, thankfully the Indorama flare makes it to where we could read a newspaper outside. The mosquitoes are...
I live by one too. I know what you mean, man. It's like dawn at night. Yeah.
For anybody that doesn't live in Sulphur, Louisiana, we have a torch literally 40 feet high. And this company, I swear every month, it's been going on for like 6 months now, and they're always like, oh, it's only another 2 weeks of this. And like we could really read our newspaper outside. But no, I mean, the people that I've been friends with him since we were 15, and so we built up these rituals, and like you literally go through these rituals, and in order to get that in-depth part of the conversation, you have to go through that fluff ritual. And so when you're meeting somebody new, like Into the Wild, you're just going straight into knowing each other. If we did this podcast every single day for 10 years, at some point it really would just be like the Jim Rome show. I don't know if you...
No, I do know exactly what you're talking about.
Awful. The bro show where they just call in and everybody's like a bro, and they just talk about the bros who used to call in 5 years ago or 10 years ago.
Yeah. No, man, I even have listened to podcasts like that. I mean, there's a fear of that even with this, where, at some point you go, hey, do you exhaust the bottom of yourself to some degree, to where I've even noticed it in, this is 40 something episodes, where I'll go, the story that I use to relate with one guest is the same story that I use to relate to another guest. What I am fascinated by is whenever something rattles loose, that I go, oh, now I forgot about this inside of myself.
No, yeah,
that's fascinating.
Definitely happens a lot in counseling too. So on average, I might work with somebody 5 times, 10 times, and so every now and then you'll get like a lifer, and they'll get to their 15th session. You're like, we've come as far as I go. Yeah. I don't know what else I have.
Actually, my daughter told me that she was in counseling for a while, and as she was going through some hard times, I would always kind of want to get like an update, like, well, so how'd it go? Share as far as she's willing to share with me. And a few times I did notice where she would say, I just feel like I don't have any more nothing's changed. Like, I don't feel like I have any more to talk about. And I'm like, yeah, it's interesting. Is that you're kind of hitting a wall, or maybe you come to the end of...
Typically, I have this belief that you should probably switch counselors every few years. You kind of...
Really?
When I first got to McNeese, I was a tuba performance major. In fact, that's probably where most people recognize me from. Is at one point I was one of the top tuba players in the state of Louisiana. And so
wow,
I think,
man.
Yeah, that's probably where most people recognize my name and my face.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
No, I made all state now, but like there's no tuba digest or anything. But I was a tuba major before I realized there weren't a lot of tuba jobs out there. You know, I was just really hoping that a tuba society would explode. You know, ska was big at the time, and maybe the tubas would branch out. But the professor there is really amazing. Bill Rose, love Mr. Rose. He's amazing. But it's like after you've been with somebody for 2 years, you could pretty much script what they were going to tell you as you would go in there. And I would almost find myself just practicing the stuff that that I knew that he would be hitting on. And he even told me one time, he's like, you have to go to different teachers. You need to go to I think Michigan State was at the time. I was looking at going and studying under Phil Cinder as a tuba player. For all you people that know all those famous professional tuba players out there, you know Phil Cinder. It just really stuck with me. And I think that's how counseling is that if you're really needing to work on stuff, you probably do need to be switching back and forth. It's really hard because I build up all these relationships, and there's some people who are just maintaining. When you're in the maintenance phase, you're just needing somebody who knows you and they can kind of help you maintain. But if you're really needing to work on stuff, you probably do need to switch. And I can look at other counselors and their clients and I'm like, oh, that person needs to switch, and I can be all judgy. But then whenever it's hard to recognize that on your own because you build these relationships with these people, it's hard to do that. But a lot of times I'll team up with other counselors also. I have a few clients that like teenage girls. There's a lot of teenage girls issues I'm just not ready to tackle. And so there's some female therapists at the office with me, and it's like maybe you should go talk to them for a couple of months and get some of these issues out. But then if they have this other issue that that they're used to dealing with me on, like a behavior issue, they might come back and see me once or twice and then go back to the other person.
Well, I didn't realize. Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't. People realize counselors did that.
We should. A lot of times we get on that island because when you get that private practice, you kind of get to yourself and you just know yourself. But some of us are working in these offices. We can kind of work as a group, especially for friends, and kind of do that.
It's interesting. I like to hear that. Actually, it's good to know. I mean, it's actually good to know just for me if I do ever go back to counseling, and you get to know that is something that, rather than just pulling the plug and saying, okay, I'm done with this, done and move away or go on. There's options there to still maintain the relationship with somebody you've got.
Oh yeah, and that goes back to what I was saying at the beginning. Is there's bad counselors out there. There's people who get in the field and maybe they shouldn't be in the field, but then there's also good counselors who just don't connect with you. There's people. I feel like one of my strengths is connecting with people, but there's a few people that I just don't connect with sometimes. And so don't just try out one person and then think that that's it. You're done. Try out different people.
I'm curious about that actually, because I had a bad. I don't even like the word. It wasn't that anything bad happened, but I had a counselor one time, and it was just like you said. I didn't feel like. Well, let me say it this way. I felt like the longer we met, the more I almost got to know about them. And the more I got to know about them, I realized there were some like really critical things that we absolutely just did not see eye to eye on. Mm-hmm. And so we couldn't really, and I think that's my own fault. And once those critical things were kind of displayed over time, I started to not hold their advice in as high regard. Isn't that terrible? I just admitted that, but I think that's what it is. I started to go, well, if you think this about this, is this advice that you're giving? Does it make sense what I just said?
It does. And even in psychology though, there's this really new technique called EMDR. It's this eye movement, blah, blah, blah thing. And it's almost, kind of reminds me of hypnosis a little bit. And it's really big with post-traumatic stress disorder and PTSD. The military is using a lot, and there's several people in my office that are trained in it. And so it's it's finding out who has their strengths. I use a lot of what's called dialectical behavioral therapy, and so that's using like mindfulness and other approaches like that. And there's other people that are cognitive behavioral therapists, other people are behavioral therapists, and so they have, everybody has different personalities, and they also have different experience and knowledge when it comes to different issues that you might have, and so there's quite a few. There's actually so one of my friends, Brent Woods, is specialized in working with sexual addiction and working with perpetrators of sexual attacks and victims of it, and that's something that I don't have any experience in. And so it's all about your personality and your issues and what you're trying to work on, and trying to find a counselor who fits that mold. And just like when you're trying to find a future spouse or like a best friend, you're going to go through quite a few people before you find that person you really connect with. And counselors, it's a lot of the same way. We try to be as moldable and as flexible as we can to be that person for you, but sometimes it just doesn't work out.
Yeah. Interesting, man. That was a good question, man. We got a lot out of that one too.
Yep.
You have one more.
I do have one more. Let's see.
It's kind of fun, huh?
It is. I was hoping maybe I could talk on the second one. And
you got a what would you rather?
What would you rather? Be incredibly smart or be incredibly popular? Man. That's a hard one. It actually is a hard one. You would think most people would say incredibly smart, but the thing is that I really hate pretentious people. Like, I really don't like elitist, pretentious snobs. Yeah. So I almost don't want to be that like incredibly smart person that can't connect with other people. On the other hand,
I see. Okay.
On the other hand, I don't like being popular either. I like being liked, but I like being the second in command. I'm very happy being the commander to somebody else's captain. And so I'm like a typical middle child centrist, and so I might have to say a little bit of both, if I could say.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Some of these "what would you rather" questions are interesting because when we first read them, it's saying, "Oh, it's one or the other." Yeah. But you could be popular and also be very smart.
You can, and both of them can go in horrible ways. I mean, we already talked about how smart doesn't really have like a set meaning. You can be smart at something and not smart at others.
You started off talking about that with.
So this is another one that I kind of Tesla. Like, people seem to be really into Tesla all of a sudden, right? Like, it was always like nowadays, like the generation's like Edison sucks and Tesla's really who should have been it. The thing people don't realize about Tesla, the man was very smart, but the man was also a bit of an ass. Can we say ass?
Y'all, you can say whatever you want.
He was kind of, he was socially awkward. He wasn't socially there. And so why did Thomas Edison win in the end? It was because he had social awareness and he wasn't a dick to people. Whereas Tesla kind of has stories where he was a bit of an ass and a bit of a dick, and so intelligence didn't really get him that far.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's interesting because you're right. We kind of we've lifted him up a lot, and I think he probably didn't get the full attention he deserved for a lot of the things that he invented. I mean, the modern world's built on that, but at the same time, when you start getting into especially towards the end of his life, you start to hear some of the things. I mean, very eccentric. I mean, never leaving his hotel room, had a lot of that, agoraphobic type tendencies.
And I love you steampunkers. I love steampunk. I love the whole Tesla thing. It's just this idolization of Tesla have always kind of baffled me, because Tesla is the biggest example of you could be as smart as anybody in the world, but if you're kind of an ass, that's kind of what happens to you, and you have to be nice to people. You have to learn how to get along with others. And I guess that's my thing, is I come from my spectrum where I feel like my intelligence is the social intelligence. I really try to push the social stuff, and so I guess feel like that's kind of my soapbox. And so to me, he's almost like an example of what not to do.
Yeah, no, I can see that. That's interesting that you brought Tesla up. I mean, I didn't even think about that. But boy, didn't he make a sick duplicator in that movie, The Prestige, though?
I love The Prestige.
I did too, man.
I did.
That was a great film.
And it does hurt me to say, because I do love steampunk. Steampunk is definitely like a whole thing. So I'm into all the Tesla stuff. I just don't really understand the glorification of it.
Yeah, no, I get that. I mean, my son that's interested in science, he talks about Tesla all the time, and we watch documentaries, every little cheap documentary on YouTube that they make, and some of them are better than others. And I was pretty fascinated whenever we got into a lot of the mental health stuff. I mean, he really had some serious issues. I mean, some of the letters he wrote towards the end of his life, especially, and even some of his theories. I mean, the science was sound, but a lot of it was, communicating with Mars and aliens, that lived on Mars. It was just stuff like that I went, well, okay, I don't know. There's also, you can be very smart, but also have bees in your brain.
Oh yes,
you know
definitely.
what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times that intelligence breeds anxiety. You're more aware of things around you, and it stresses you out more, and that anxiety's there. And if you don't learn how to control that, then kind of can go into that paranoia realm, and even into hallucinations and delusions eventually. And so that's kind of why I do a lot of mindfulness and things like that. That way you kind of calm your brain down and let your brain have that.
What do you do to do that? Do you have like a go-to technique for yourself to where you go, okay, I'm kind of feeling anxious or stressed, and I'm going to go ahead and get zeroed in?
I really love guided imagery.
Okay.
I don't know if you've ever read the Wheel of Time series.
No.
Okay, they have a thing. I don't know if you want me to do like a guided imagery thing, like a little thing with the listeners.
Go for it. Do you want to?
I could
do it.
Okay, and so as I do my guided imagery, I try to.
Great.
Yeah, everybody get to like a little quiet place, place where kids aren't going to interrupt you, and you can kind of listen around. And what I want you to do is I want you to close your eyes and relax yourself. Get to where you can almost, like if you've ever seen the Salvador Dali picture of the melting clocks, you want to kind of have your body be like the melting clocks where everything's just nice and relaxed. And I want you to just listen to the sounds. You can actually hear the cars passing, I think, in the podcast. Usually in my room there's a clock you can hear, and I ask the clients to try to lower their heart rate to where the clock is. And what I want you to do is I want you to visualize that we're outside. It's a nice spring day, and it's warm, kind of cool still. So it's like when the wind comes in, you can feel this cold breeze on your arm, but the sun is out, and that's what's kind of warming you. You feel the warmth of the sun on your skin. I want you to smell the flowers, pollen in the air, hear the birds chirping. And we look in front of us and we see this lake. It's this, not what we have in Louisiana, but this beautiful, glassy, smooth surface, like in Colorado. And there's this mountain in the background, and like on Forrest Gump, you can't see where the mountain begins and the reflection ends. And I want you to pretend like you walk up to this lake. You place your head fully above the water to where the only thing in your vision is this water. Just glassy, smooth surface. Now I want you to picture that a rock gets thrown in and there's ripples in the water. And I want you to smooth that water back out again. Smooth those ripples towards this smooth surface. And as you smooth it, again, another rock gets thrown in. Smooth the ripples out, create this nice flat surface. And you start to realize that every time a rock gets thrown in and ripples are going, that's a thought passing in your brain. And so I want you to clear your thoughts, smooth these ripples out, create that smooth surface. And another rock goes in, ripples, just smooth it out. Okay, go ahead and open your eyes. Now, normally that's a little bit. If we were in a session, I'd try to slow my voice down a little bit and let that go on a little bit longer. Whenever when you close your eyes, your vision takes up most of your brain processing, and so when you close your eyes, your other senses start to kind of reach out and take over, and you concentrate. And as you're concentrating, that's whenever a lot of your cortisol and other chemicals kind of get washed away a little bit, and you're able to relax. And as you're pushing those thoughts out, it just calms you down, relaxes you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, meditation, sometimes this happens when I'm in meditation. you know, and there's always run the risk in meditation of just falling asleep if you're not careful. Yep. But one thought that occurs to me that comes back and kind of brings me out of it sometimes, and I have to kind of go back through the process of just watching thoughts and letting them go away, is where am I in this? Sometimes that catches me where I go, where, and I like that space, to be honest. That's it's almost where I want to be, but it's hard to remain there because a thought will come in and say, almost inside of yourself, it says, where are you at now in this space? And then that's almost a little bit of a fear kind of flickers.
Yeah.
And you just, the identity sort of rushes back in and just like water filling that space.
Well, and whether you believe in creationism or evolution, I mean, if you believe in creationism, then you don't believe that God designed us for this world. You believe that God designed us for like an Adam and Eve kind of Eden thing. And then if you believe in evolution, then you believe that it takes generations to evolve. And so when you're talking about the human brain, you're talking about a brain that is designed for what, like 11th, 12th century, and so you're talking about a brain that is not supposed to have smartphones. It's not supposed to. I mean, there's sometimes where I have my computer, my smartphone, and we're watching something on TV, and my wife's talking to me, and that is not what our brain is designed for. And so you need these downtimes. You need these times to reset because our brain is just not supposed to function in the way that we're trying to force it to.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. I mean, that's I think causing problems. I mean, even admitting there's a problem is one thing, and then stopping it's another thing. Because I would say, just like I was kind of almost, I would say, call it complaining, saying that education is putting all these things in front of children for the bulk of their day, and not an emotional intelligence factor. We're doing that as adults a lot of times too. I mean, my job is a screen most of the time, unless I'm in this type of interaction. And that's one of the reasons too, I've tried to like pull some of that back and continue doing analog things like paper sketching and paper drafting and paper planning, because if you just get right in, if you're using a piece of software, it is, yes, perhaps more efficient. There's all these ways to share with everybody. Yeah. But even there's an extra step. I do prefer to sit and plan out on paper. Yeah, definitely. I mean, we just have too much going on. I mean, that's really it. And you always have this drive to make something else better. You know, you want to improve the relationship with your family. You want to improve the relationship with your wife. You want to have more friends. You want to go out and do more. You want to travel more. You want to have more money. And at some point, we have to realize that we have so much going on in society that we have to pare it down and simplify things. And that gets hard. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens in psychology too when they're already talking about screen addiction and video game addiction, and we really haven't even gotten to the depths of what that's going to do. Like the kids that are growing up with the screen stuff, they might be in their 20s now, and so we have no idea what that's going to do when they're in their 50s or 60s. It could even be something positive. It could be something negative. We really don't know where this is going to go. Well, you know, it's like having a memory of another time. I've talked about this with my teenage son a lot. I said, well, you know, I have screens in my life, and I have computers in my life. I said, but you know, there was a time in my life when those things didn't exist. So I have recollection. So I can recall my childhood and that not being there. I can recall my junior high school life. It's not there. Computers don't start showing up in my life until sometime in high school. Yeah. Okay. And then smartphones don't start showing up in my life until 2008 or 9, something like that. So you're talking a decade of that. I can always recall the time though, and it has something inside of my memory that I can touch. So I actually can say, oh, this pristine thing. And I guess every generation's like that, where people can go, oh, I can recall a time when there were no power lines. I can recall a time when this road there was no Walmart, it was fields. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? I mean, there's always going to be that, but for every other generation, there's always the line gets moved. And you're right. I mean, these kids will not have that recollection. They won't even they can't recall it. They can't say, I remember when. Oh yeah, that doesn't exist. It really is. We really are turning into the old people. Well, sure. I told my son. My son was born in 2003, and this really hit me a few years ago. We were watching a documentary about 9/11, and I wanted him to watch it. I was like, you know, you need to know. He's like, so tell me about it. And I'm sitting here going, you really don't know a lot about this, do you? Like, he really doesn't know a lot. He's like, so what caused it? What happened? I know there were the planes and the towers. I was like, man, this is interesting. Like, in my mind, I'm going, this is just a part of the world. You just know what happened. But he's like, no, nobody ever talks about it. They don't tell us about it. They don't like teach us about it and all the details. And it's like, oh, we need to watch a documentary. So we found a good one. We watched it and he was blown away. And I said, you know what's crazy? I said, is your whole world has been reframed in a way by this one event, right? I said, in that moment, the world kind of did change again in a big way.
Oh, definitely.
So you were born into a world where that happens and you're born. You know,
I belong to the Star Trek group on Facebook, and which is kind of embarrassing to say at first, but it's can you cuss on the podcast?
You can say whatever you want.
It's called Star Trek shit posting, and so it's supposed to be about memes, but it kind of gets in a conversation a lot, and it's interesting seeing what the younger people put, because they'll they're watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and it'll be like a murder happens, and then they have to try to solve the murder, and then people post, why didn't they just check the cameras? And it's like, because this was made back in a time where we didn't want people to have cameras on us all the time. Right. They didn't, you guys, you can envision the future where it's like Big Brother and there's always cameras on you and everybody sees what everybody's doing at the time. But when you're talking about the 90s, the thought of having a futuristic society where there are cameras everywhere was a nightmare. That was like Orwellian.
1984. That's right. That's exactly right.
And nowadays, kids are like, well, there should be cameras everywhere. And it's like, wow, I didn't even think about that. Like that really, but when you look at TV shows in the 90s and it's futuristic TV shows, they didn't even assume there would be cameras on starships in the 24th century watching everything. And when you see a kid watching that now, they're like, I don't get it. Why wasn't there just a camera?
Yeah, it's like even shows I watched in the 90s, they'll say, now imagine if they would have had a smartphone, the whole show just falls apart. I mean, 24 with Kiefer Sutherland was like that. They said, so much of that could have they'll have these little parodies where they'll say the technology, if you insert it in this episode, today's technology, these problems don't exist. This whole drama that they've built, all that gets solved with a simple text or a phone call. Right. And just the whole thing's erased.
Right. Why didn't they just call somebody? It's like, because when I was growing up in high school, we had pagers. That was the pager thing. So
the insertion of technology. I was reading, I can't remember the exact quote, but I was reading some Thomas Merton the other day, and he was kind of talking about that in some of his old journals about, of course, technology to him, this is the 60s, right? Mm-hmm. So whatever's new technology, that's what he meant. But I think his point was still valid. He was just, saying that we can't just say technology's evil, right? I mean, he said there are some things that are better because of technology. Oh,
most definitely.
But it's just being consumed by it is a different thing entirely.
It's just like when we were talking about that utopian society and post-scarcity. There's always going to be positives and negatives to everything, right? And so even when, what would be the negative utopia? It would be that some people would probably not really feel empowered. They probably wouldn't go out and find their best selves, which is better than people starving to death, but it's still the negative. And so the negative to technology is going to be that as you make I think I have 1,400 friends on Facebook or something like that, and as you get to where you have all these this number of acquaintances that you were never able to have before, and so this connection that me and you have never would have been able to be made in the 90s, and so podcasts never, and so those are positive things. But then when you look at actual deep connections, where you're talking about friends of families that are actually thicker than blood, a lot of those aren't there as much anymore, and there's going to be some negatives to it, but then there's also going to be some positives to that connectiveness.
It's interesting. I don't know if you watch a lot of TV, but well, you do watch stuff. I mean, obviously you watch science fiction stuff.
I veg out and stuff. And
have you ever watched American Gods?
I started it, but I didn't get to finish it. It didn't catch me as much as some of the other shows.
Really? I thought it was interesting because it's got the new gods and the old gods of technology gods.
I think we got to where that lady kind of ate the dude up in her thing. That was kind of, and we liked it.
Yeah,
we wanted to keep going. There was just I think it's like our list of shows is this long, and then what we're able to watch is this long.
I hear you.
And that was one of the ones that kind of got push the side a little
Do you know what's interesting? My wife and I hit a wall a while back where we were just like, nothing looked good. And we'd like to watch shows. We really do. And so we were saying, you know what we need to watch? Highway to Heaven with Michael Landon.
Wow, old school.
Yeah,
okay.
and so we went back and it was like, and not just to try to watch wholesome stuff or anything. I was just like, I used to like to watch this at my grandma's house when I was a kid. So we were like, well, they're all on Netflix. And so we started watching them, and we did that for like 2 months. Every night we put on Highway to Heaven. And what's funny is I told her, I said, do you realize like the state of mind that this show has put us in?
Yes. I mean, exactly. I remember my wife being pregnant, and we were like really into The Walking Dead. And I just remember her like being pregnant and kind of stressed, and then being even more stressed during The Walking Dead, like pacing around and stuff. And I'm like, this isn't good.
Yeah.
Probably shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
And I mean, the media, this is hard for people to really do, but you really do need to be watching and listening for the mood that you want to be in.
Man, that is, God, say it again.
We listen and we watch for the mood that we're in. And so when we're depressed, we put on depressing shows, we put on depressing music. When we're angry, we put on angry music. But you really do need to listen and watch for the mood that you want to be in. And we don't do that enough. We go for the ones that keeps us in those feels. Anxiety, anger, depression, they have this really weird way of making you want to stay in that state. It's like you're miserable, and if you're talking to somebody, you're like, I don't want to feel that way. But it's like if I walked in, I had this button, I was like, hey, look, if you push this button, you're not gonna be angry at this person anymore. You're like, nah, I kind of want to be angry.
Yeah,
like, I could feel better
seduction,
being angry.
man. It's
and so it's literally, if you know that you have this happy song and you put on this happy song, and all of a sudden you're gonna feel better, there's this thing that you're just like, no, that's a lame song. I don't want to put it in right now. Or the TV show, that's a lame TV show. I don't want to watch it. But you know you're going to feel better watching that. You really should be assaulting yourself with positive stuff.
I totally agree. I do. I totally agree. And social media, I talk about this on this show all the time. And I was talking about it with my son. I said, before the internet, before social media, and before chat rooms even, really, the way you communicated with people was through devices that required you to be intimate with each other. Mm-hmm. If I was going to call you, we were going to have a conversation. It was going to be, I could hear your voice. There was like a level of connection that was there.
Yes.
I used to love my CB radio heck, I just got rid of mine, actually. I've had it for years, and I loved it because I loved the idea of hearing a voice and then changing the channel to get certain voices and then tuning the dials to hear the voices I wanted to hear. I remember driving around, and we'd play these games when we'd go to Lake Charles and like try to get closer to other people's signal, and then you'd meet people and you only really knew them by their CB handle, but on the weekends you would know the same groups of people and you get to know them. And I told him, I said, there was something special about that.
Yeah.
With social media, though, we treat it totally different. We treat it like this door that sort of just opens and whatever just floods in. But no other communication tool was like that. It was not just a big flood of stuff. It was focused and dialed in, and you got it the way you wanted it. And so I said, maybe social media, if I start looking at it the way I looked at a CB or a ham radio, it might be a little different for me. And just put it on the signals that I want to get.
And it's out there, because if you go out and find certain groups, right? So I used to be really before I had the kids, I got really addicted to guitar pedals. Bass player, and my pedal board had like 13, 14 pedals. And I was in this group called ilovefuzz.com for fuzz pedals, sexual stuff. But it was... we had this really close-knit group, and I actually had friends that would make cross-country trips to come and visit just from this group. And you can find that on Facebook. You can find those like Star Trek shit posting, and you start to see the same people posting there, and you make these connections.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, people don't. And a lot of times you have those people who... There's more trolls than people realize on Facebook. So I had friends 5-10 years ago who would create fake handles that looked real that would go on like the KPLC page and post like harassing stuff.
Just
sometimes
stir
even
shit up. I mean,
just to stir shit up. Sometimes even racist stuff. And it's like, guys, that's really embarrassing. And I'll even see to this day, I'll see people say, "Oh, that KPLC page with all that stuff on it."
I mean, I'm guilty.
It's like half those people probably aren't even real. They're just going on there to stir shit up.
Honestly, the reality is it could even be paid trolls. You know what I mean? Like just to keep it interesting, it's sensational. That's what people want.
Oh yeah,
so
we will go out there to Russian bots. That's where we're going with this guy. But I mean, no, I mean it really is, and so you're really finding people who really get on. And I've kind of noticed in my life too. I've noticed that and I don't want to say less happy because I'm happy in my life, but it's more of the busier I get, the more I spend on Facebook. So like when my wife is really in the crunch with McNeese and her finals are coming in and she's barely got time to focus on stuff, I've noticed that I kind of turn to Facebook and social media a little bit more, or saintsreport.com was another thing a website I would go to. And then whenever she would get done with finals, it's like there'd be like a period where it's like she's looking to do stuff with me and I'm like addicted to the stuff.
Oh, I see what you mean.
And then I have to put it down and then we're happy. But I've noticed that whenever I do start spending more time online, it's because there's something missing in real life.
Yeah.
And so she's busy with all of her finals. She's not able to pay attention to me. I turn to social media and things do tend to get more negative. They tend to get darker. And then whenever she does get free, it's like I have to force myself to be like, this phone needs to go away. And if I'm not paying attention to it, I can get stuck in that online trend for a long time. But it's like I have to force myself to put it away so I can spend more time with her. And I think it's the trap. I think some people don't have that wherewithal to be able to put the phone away, and so they kind of get stuck in that social media trap. And I think other people don't realize, I think they get too into their online persona that they don't realize the reason why they're turning to it is because they're missing that thing in real life. I
think you're right. I think, that's as interesting because, I mean, this show puts me in a different place because now people... I mean, I want to make the show, right? I mean, that's part one. I say, I want to put this show out there. Why? Well, I want to focus on good people doing good things in the community. I want to celebrate them. To celebrate them, I have to be a part of the conversation. So then I'm therefore out there too. And what's my personality, right? I mean, so I've tried really hard to not fake it. I mean, I go, look, I can't fake it. If this is going to be anything that's going to keep going, I have to be 100% me, whatever that is. Sometimes it's not something that needs to be out there. So I said, well, okay, I've just got to say, let it go and let it be real, right?
It's so hard though, but you're also that ray of sunshine that's needed because there's these trolls here and there's people who look at it and they see these racist, bigoted trolls and these things and they need to see not everybody's like that. And so it's hard because they also need those champions who come in and say, this isn't how everybody thinks.
Well, you're right. That has been the silver lining to this whole thing, experiment, I guess, has been, what I have gotten feedback, and I guess I would say publicly and then sort of off radar and like DMs and messages like that. But I get messages from people and they say, God, I've always thought that, or I didn't want to say it, or I feel that way. I'm so glad I'm not alone. It's those little messages like that when they come in. I go, okay, so there's people out there sort of maybe too afraid to. It's unfortunate, really, actually, as I say it. That's why are we afraid to be kinder? Why are we afraid to, not join the status quo? Why are we afraid of that? I don't know, but there's something out there making people fear on different levels. It can be different for everybody, but there's something out there that makes some people afraid to be open and honest and loving and kind and put that out there and take it for the underdog. And I go, man, it's so sad that we live in a world where that's sort of become demonized almost, or you label it, it's labeled.
I mean, we live in a time where it's compromise is considered bad, and trying to find common ground even with bad people. It's like even with if you talk about Nazis, right? If you talk about, hey, maybe I should try to talk to this Nazi and see, no, you're evil if you don't want to just punch them. Just go punch Nazis. It's like, okay, that's a really smart idea because, okay, so you have this evil person and your idea is you want to punch him, which isn't going to stop him. So now you have this evil person who's been punched. What are they going to do? Probably something worse.
Yeah.
And so, and then if you're the person that's like, well, I want to go see if maybe I could, change him a little bit. It's like, oh, well, now you're evil. It's like, well,
yeah.
But maybe that's the counselor in me. When I see incels and when I see Nazis, and then they're a real problem. This is a real thing that we need to deal with. My first thought is, man, I wish I could have that person in my session. I wish I could find out what's going on there and try to figure out how to fix it. And then everybody else is just like, well, if you don't want to punch them, then you're evil also. It's like,
there's a guy I listen to, man. I listen to his YouTube channel, and he's real conservative, and not that that's bad all the time, but because I don't want to use that word as a demonizing term either. I mean, because that word shouldn't be that way. Mm-hmm. But in what it means in today's world, I would say most people would consider a conservative talk show, and it's called Steven Crowder. You know who I'm talking about? He does the Change My Mind stuff where he goes on college campuses.
I've seen the memes. I've never
heard. A lot of people have seen the memes.
Yeah.
Well, I actually watch his show, and when I tell people that, they're like, why in the world do you watch that? You and he don't see eye to eye. I said, shockingly, I watched that show because, I know he's baiting people. He goes to these college campuses with inflammatory subjects, and he's prepared, and they're not, and they want to sit down, and they argue with him, and he's got information, and they don't, and he wins, and they look stupid. That's most of the time the formula.
Yeah.
But I am fascinated to watch his show because it's just like what you said. I'm like, this is interesting because by watching his show, I get a peek into the other side a little bit because he's not hot-headed. Mm-hmm. And the way he presents his information, I'm like, he's doing this the right way. The problem is if you're going to debate or have a conversation with someone like him, you need to know going in, you need to have your stuff together.
You do,
You need to have yourself together. And then you can, and I guess in a way, getting back to your point is that I like watching it for the same reason I guess you'd like to have somebody like that in your session. I can watch that and go, I can get a pretty fair view of what the other side thinks.
It's like watching abortion rights get discussed. You have one side who is saying, you're attacking women. This is all about women's rights. And then you have this other side saying, this is babies. This is about babies living. And then they fight each other. And it's like, you guys aren't even talking about the same thing. Okay, because y'all aren't even talking about the same thing. And so y'all can have this conversation and you're never, ever going to be able, because you're fighting this thing over here and you're fighting this thing over here. And so watching the other side, you can kind of get to where, because if somebody who is pro women's rights could understand, hey, these people think that this is a baby, it's a little bit easier to have a conversation and see what we can do about this. Whereas if the other person, if they're looking at, hey, this person is feeling like their rights are being infringed on, we can have a little bit of a conversation.
Right.
But we have this sensationalized thing where we're just arguing squares versus apples, and it's
right. And honestly, that's something that I think that's the big trick, honestly, out there, is if you can keep people worried in one camp or the other, then they're never going to talk about middle ground, and that chaos ensues, and then that's kind of where profits are gained.
And that's where you could go into a whole other podcast with me, because that's where you get into my that stuff's all stirred up, just kind of keep us from the real issues. Because I mean, when you talk to most Americans, I think whether you're liberal, whether you're conservative, whether you're centrist, most people agree we need to get rid of lobbyists. We need to get rid of lobbyists. We need to get rid of that. And it's to the point where I want to say if they polled the nation, I think 95% of people would agree on it, but it never happens because politicians gain from lobbyists and they keep us fighting over these rights and social things. And so this thing that everybody pretty much agrees on sticks there to the benefit of the politicians because we get our focus taken away from it.
Oh, sure. Unity is not profitable.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah, discord is for sure.
Yep.
How do people get in touch with you? If they want to get in touch with you, how should they find you?
Okay, so there's not a lot of B Plauches out there, so I was able to snag bplauche@gmail.com. That's BPLAUCHE@gmail.com. I think there's a Beverly Plauché somewhere in Mississippi that uses that also, except I actually have the website. So every now and then I get signed up for like these church luncheons to bring casseroles and stuff. I have to be like, hey, I'm not Beverly, sorry. But bplauche@gmail.com is the easiest way. I'm also at New Horizons Counseling Centers, where I have my private practice, 337-478-1411. And then we actually, the tabletop gaming group, we have a group on Facebook. This is a weird one. It's Tabletop Gaming Group of Excellence +1. Maybe it's +2. I can't remember. I think it's +2. But that's Tabletop Gaming Group of Excellence. You can just type in Tabletop Gaming Group of Excellence and that'll pop up and you can join that. And we put when we're going to have our next sessions and things like that.
Wow, thank you so much, man. I really do appreciate you coming. This is a good conversation.
Oh, definitely. Yep, love it.
And I love you just as well.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Find the Good News. If you would like to advertise on this show or sponsor an episode, just visit findthegood.news. Send me a message and we'll see about getting your business, organization, service, product, or event on the show. I deeply thank each of you again for supporting this podcast.